there in the background, we got an Aziz surprise on Channel Azora Hive. What's going on, everyone? Really, really excited to be here. We've been talking about doing this for a while, talking about The Witcher Season 1. Certainly, there's been a lot of talk about it. A lot of people have really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's time to just dive deep into this, The Witcher Season 1, the first live stream on the channel to talk about this. So I'm really excited. But without further ado, before we get into all the talk today, I would like to introduce my special guest, Aziz from History of Westeros. What's going on, man?
Hey, Kyle. Great to be here. This is so much fun. I'm new yet already very delved deep into The Witcher, and I'm super excited to talk about it. So yeah, thanks for having me. This is gonna be super fun.
Yeah, so me and just to be clear with everyone, both me and Aziz, well, I think what we should do first actually is kind of talk a little bit about our own personal Witcher experiences, because before the season, I didn't want to spoil too much for you because you were just getting started into books. I've read the books and played the games, and we won't try to spoil too much because there are some people, most people haven't read the book, so we'll try to not spoil too much, but still give as much analysis as we can today. But Aziz, kind of talk a little bit about your Witcher experience first before we dive into kind of like a reaction review type of podcast episode here.
Sounds good. Well, I am, like I said, fairly new to it, yet already I've gone really far with it in a short time. I, at first, kind of ignored the franchise. I had the impression that it was just kind of a hack and slash adventure-y story, which didn't really appeal to me at first. But once I saw the character profiles on Netflix for some of the show, I was like, okay, this is maybe not what I thought. And it was only about a week before the show came out. I was up in Boston with, if any of y'all are familiar with the Song of Ice and Fire community, I was staying with the folks from Radio Westeros up in Boston. And I decided to start reading the Witcher novels then about a week before the show.
I remember you talking on, like, you were like sitting before your flight. You're like, I'm already on the third book. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
You've read everything.
I went quickly. I was really determined to get to at least what I had heard was the point where this first season ends. And I actually got well past that because I just wanted, and of course the season one mostly is about the early short stories, but it contains parts from the main novels, etc. So it's kind of a, it's an adaptation, so they couldn't do a strict one-to-one relationship. But we'll talk about that more later. But I'm really loving the books. I'm almost done with the final book in the main series. Then of course there's a prequel book after that I'm going to read called Season of Storms. And I haven't tried the game yet. I might do that, but that part is, I haven't even gotten involved in that aspect yet. And there's just so much to do. So it's a great universe. I love the fact when I saw that it was written so long ago, that was a surprise to me. I didn't realize how long ago it had been written. The first story appeared in like 1986. and that the fact that it was written in Polish and then translated, that was a plus for me too, because I thought, different, an author with a different upbringing than an American author or somebody that's a little more familiar to the kind of stuff I usually read will have different takes on things, different attitudes. Maybe the writing style will be a little different. So that was very appealing. And it turns out to be, that turned out to be true. His style is a little different. The translation creates a few kind of interesting turns of phrases and things like that, word usages, which adds to the flavor of the world because it feels a little different if you're, a Western American or Canadian or what have you.
Yeah, the interesting part about Slavic mythology is really those monster stories, the twists on the fairy tales, which we're going to talk about definitely, because we're going to talk about some of our favorite short stories that were adapted and some that weren't. Like The End of the World is one of my favorites, and that wasn't kind of that was I think that's my second favorite after The Lesser Evil. That one, like, they had to kind of make some cuts to make the timelines, which we're gonna talk about as well, kind of work for season one, which is, I think, the main critique of season one overall is the confusing timelines. That was a little bit of a difficult thing to get into, but thanks for sharing that, Aziz. That's really cool. And the thing I love about this too is, like, me and you are both we both made most of our content, if not almost all of our content, on A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. So this is this new thing that happens, and yes, they share similarities, but it's just like so refreshing because this is like unabashed high fantasy. It's like got some really cheesy comedy stuff. It's got some things that people will certainly compare to Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
but I think
inevitable.
it's inevitable. But I think, yeah, like overall, we're just about to get into our review and reaction here. It's pretty good. Just my personal experience with The Witcher, read the books, listening to the audiobooks. I usually do it at the same time. I have some issues with reading, dyslexia, that kind of thing. So I try to listen and read so I can comprehend as much as possible. But The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. I'd probably rank it number 2 after Final Fantasy 7. So that's really high for me. Of course, the show is Lauren Histrich has talked about they're doing the books, although there are some really, really cool nods from the games into the show, certainly that people have pointed out as well. But I think overall, my experience with The Witcher, I just started my second playthrough of The Witcher 3. I'm playing some of the DLC content, which kind of connects with the last book, Blood and Wine and Toussaint. We're not going to get into too much of that today. But yeah, I absolutely love the stories. It's definitely different than Game of Thrones, but it's up there in some of my favorite content that I enjoy. You guys know I like Marvel, The Expanse. Right now, I'm like, Witcher is my favorite right now because it's right now. So really, really enjoying it. I love the first season. We're going to talk about camera work, mythology, characters, everything. And yeah, let's just dive into it, Aziz. So me and you both kind of have a little bit of a different experience. I'm sure in the chat, feel free to tell us about what you like. If you've read the books or you're just watching the show, please share that with us so we can kind of get like a little bit more of an idea of how much we can share with you today. But let's talk season 1, Aziz. What were your overall thoughts of this season? I think my favorite episodes were episode 3 and 1, specifically because of the tone of the episodes and because of the short stories that were adapted. But what was your overall thoughts of the season? Because you've read the books and they have adapted some of these short stories into the season.
Yeah, like you said, there was a lot of they faced some challenges. I think in some ways, in terms of storytelling, I feel like season 1's the biggest challenge. I think it will be easier for them in future seasons. Not that it'll be easy, but as far as, and that's the nature of the way the books came to be, which is that Andrzej Sapkowski started writing short stories, and then he started connecting those short stories, not loosely, but not as tightly as the later novels. And so that's probably going to be easier for the showrunners to adapt, because once you get into the main series, it's more of a connected story rather than a series of somewhat connected stories. And also the major challenge is, of course, that the characters don't get introduced in the same way in the books. And because they're so major, you don't want to like not have Ciri until season 2. But if they were following the books, you wouldn't have nearly as much Ciri in season 1, which, you know, I don't think that's a spoiler to say that. But lining things up the way they do to make sure you introduce some of these main characters so they're introduced a certain way to change, that's a difference from the books, but it's one that makes total sense. And it was fairly smooth, I think. Like you said, there's some short story stuff they just couldn't use. There's just too much. But I thought it was very strong. It's, as far as an adaptation goes, they captured a lot of the feel of the books. Like you said, the books are very funny. They don't take themselves. They're very serious in some parts, but they constantly remind you that this is that it's supposed to be entertainment. It's fun. It's not. It's deep in a lot of ways. There's lots of things that make you think. There's lots of really powerful themes that are really complex and meaningful. There's lots of conflict. There's lots of
the lesser evil, the law of surprise, those types of things. And then we have the court jester-esque type of character in Jaskier or Dandelion, for those of you that play the games. So yeah, I'm in agreement there, Aziz. It did feel like there was some chunkiness in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like getting from episode 4 to episode 5, those first 4 episodes, they wanted to showcase, in essence, the origin stories of these characters, like introduce like how they were going to be important going forward. And you didn't want to like diminish Yennefer or Ciri in the first season by just having it be all Geralt. Because mainly if we go mostly by the book, it's mainly Geralt and the people that, you know, kind of complement Geralt. One thing I kind of want to compare to what you said was, I had the same kind, like when I first got into Game of Thrones, season 1, for me, at the end of the season, I was like, oh, okay, like all these houses, that's what's going on. There's kind of this, you know, this this monarchy going on. There's issues and there's war, and that for me, like getting like when season 2 came out, I started to understand that there was going to be a lot of these different characters and kingdoms and things that I was going to need to grasp and understand within the story. That it's just going to happen like that because it's such a massive story. And I think that that's kind of like we can apply some of the same things that people had an issue with Game of Thrones in understanding the story in the beginning, the characters' names, the kingdoms, what's going on behind the scenes, the past history, especially, which will be, like you said, illuminated more, especially with what happens in Blood of Elves, going with the character, the POV characters coming together like they did in Game of Thrones and focusing on more, I don't want to say one plot point, but the main plot point that we're going to be seeing with The Witcher. So I think that you're right with what you're saying. Like, hey, like we had to kind of have these origin stories for us first before we really got to kind of the main plot points that we're going to define all of the future seasons. Yeah,
for example, I see in the chat here our friend Bernie saying that they weren't able to do a whole lot with Ciri in the first season. She just kind of goes around and is escaping and running from people who want to take her, and you get the sense that she's powerful and has inherited some magical bloodline. All that's true, and I agree it hasn't gone that far with her, but you're right, it is kind of a setup for her to do more later. And she's still a young girl, that's part of it. It's kind of like Sansa in season 1 of Game of Thrones. She's important, but mostly she's just being dragged around and forced to do things and kind of react before she gets to kind of take her own agency and start moving the plot herself, which, not to compare, I don't think Sansa and Ciri are all that similar, other than just to compare pull out a random Game of Thrones character that was young at first that is being dragged around by adults, and later
from a showrunner perspective, how you're going to construct the story. I want to interject here really quickly, Aziz. What's really interesting is Lauren, the showrunner, Lauren Hisrick, she said in the beginning when they were doing drafting, writing for the show, she originally was going to do the perspective of Ciri and tell the story from Ciri. And I don't want to spoil too much for the later books, but there is kind of that vibe with Ciri, especially in the last book. But I think that she made the right decision going forward, because instead of doing Geralt as kind of this like Jon Snow, for example, just making it like him and making him like he's just the main guy. I think they made the right decision because, wow, did they nail the casting of Yennefer with Anya Chalotra?
Yes, absolutely.
She's one of my, if not my favorite character from the games and the books. But she just speaking about season 2, said more of the focus was going to be on Ciri and the Law of Surprise and her bloodline, and kind of revealing that in season 2. So they definitely needed to kind of be like, okay, the stories of Geralt and Yennefer, we need to kind of tell their past stories a little bit for you to be able to understand what's going to happen in the future a little bit more. And I think
to build on that, without again, we're trying to avoid book spoilers, but we're going to do some, we talk about vague plot arc stuff. Yeah, there's like, for some of the books have more Ciri than Geralt by a lot, like a lot. Geralt is hardly in one of the books, one of the main novels, for example. And to be fair, there's one of the books that doesn't have that much Ciri, but most of them are very Ciri. Like, she's the most important character, even though she's not the first character, because obviously the books are called The Witcher. That was the first character that Andrzej Sapkowski, when he wrote the first short story, that was the character he was thinking of. But the world has grown since then, and Geralt himself is a great vehicle for moving the action and for having he's a MacGuffin in a lot of ways. He can help drive the action, but he's not the character that people find the most interesting a lot of times. Some people do, and that's cool. But I think a lot of people also look at him as kind of a little bit monolithic, as just a big badass kind of grunty guy that is a little bit of a curmudgeon and kind of hard to get him to be human. But that's sort of the point, right? And seeing if he and having him change over time is going to be interesting to see if he changes. And part of what's interesting about that is he's so old, and you wouldn't expect a guy that old.
He's like 90, 95 in the show, and a lot of people don't know that.
How's a 90-year-old guy gonna change quickly? Like, he's gonna change his ways on a flip of a coin, on a dime like that? Nah, he's in his 90s like that. Everybody knows the older we get, the more stubborn we are, right? not even if Jaskier tosses a coin his way. So yeah.
So let's do some shout outs in chat. Aziz, cool. Definitely let you go back on what you were going to talk about there in just a second. I do want to do some shouts. Shelby Runyon has tossed a coin to your YouTubers. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. When I see Aziz in Atlanta next at probably probably Con of Thrones first, I will buy him a coffee. So we'll split that. We both. Cool. I think we're both drinking coffee right now. So cheers, everyone. I see AU Pac Mule, who's actually going to be going live with Costume Co. They're doing a stream at 9 p.m. tonight, so please go check them out. Nice to see you, AU. Nice to see other people chatting about The Witcher too. But Shelby, do you want to give Shelby a shout out? She runs the group The Witcher Addicts on Facebook. Great group, and that's where we're doing a lot of our memeing and a lot of our discussion and stuff like that. So if anybody wants to go join a group on Facebook, kind of like Geek Chat One, and you want to go chat with some Witcher, Shelby is the runner of that group. Yeah, Clarissa, thanks, Shelby. Clarissa Thompson, Carol Brown. I think I saw Helen in here. Aziz.
She was, yeah. She was there. I think she's already had to dip, but she was there for a minute.
Urtach Altanaz.
Yeah, Urtach. Hey,
Urtach. John Webster, who's doing great content as well with Steven Stark. Daisy Kowalczykowski. There's a name if you want to understand some Witcher stuff. She loves it. Ciri's grandmother was Maggie the Frog. We're going to talk about a lot of that after. We'll get some stuff from the chat too. Make sure I save that one. To Dawson, I'm trying to get some Stacy Meyer, who's also a moderator in The Witcher Addicts, Kate Bertinsky, Cindy Sammy, and I want to give a shout out to Maura Lee. She wasn't able to be here today. She was actually the first one. I know I'm being a little bit of a shameless plug here. She was the first one to press that join button on the channel. So
good job, Maura.
Yeah, Maura, I had to give her a shout out for that. So thank you everyone for joining, and Madison Goodyear, who's also Witcher Addict mod. Thank you for tossing us some coins.
Madison.
So going back to you, Aziz, you wanted to finish your point there. I just want to do some shout outs.
Sure. So I'd say that if you, well, I kind of don't know where I was, but just talking about the adaptation. Yeah. So the general idea, for example, a couple of fun things they do with the adaptation, like Geralt's, in the books, he's a lot more talkative, and he has a lot of he thinks a lot. He ponders a lot of things, and there's a lot of philosophy and morality and ethics of stuff that we see in, for example, episode 6, where you're talking about the evolution of species and how you have 3 different characters: Geralt, the dragon, Borch 3 jackdaws, and Yennefer, who are all kind of having their own thoughts on protect the next generation or having kids and all that, and how rare and how problematic their own experiences are, because you have a dragon they're dying out, Yennefer is sterile, and Geralt is sterile, so they're all like coming together on this, hey, we're all 3 very powerful beings, but we have we have this limited future because we can't, so they're in a way they're more powerful, but in a way they're lesser, and they're kind of bonding over that. And I find that really fascinating, the things that you can do with high fantasy that are harder to do without using big magic and things like that. It's harder to come up with these conundrums.
Yeah, like the big overarching theme that's like, and it's great that The Lesser Evil is kind of the first short story in the season to kind of teach us that lesson of humans can be the worst monsters. And that's kind of one of the big, it's one of the biggest overarching themes that we saw in Game of Thrones as well, by the way. And that's why I think some people want to make that comparison. But I think that's one of the biggest overarching themes throughout the games and all the way out through the books that we definitely want to see. And the showrunner talked about how that they wanted to set that tone with that first episode, especially with this strong connection between Renfrey and Geralt. This idea, the thing that Stregobor talked about, like this kind of a persecution of people that are a little bit different. We heard these anti-elven attitudes that we're going to talk about as well, Aziz. But ultimately, it all relates back to Ciri and her blood and kind of where that story is going with that. So there are these the xenophobia, these like strong themes of racism and hereditary monarchy, things that we like, Andrzej and people like George R.R. Martin talk about now in our real society. These lessons that they tell through high fantasy, like you were saying, Aziz.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to have these interesting ethical questions that don't apply to the real world. It's something if I can use a Game of Thrones example real briefly, like the whole idea that killing a child can prevent war. That's something that is really hard to imagine. Of course, in the real world, we rightfully reject that notion that it's ever right to kill a child. I mean, not all of us reject it, but you and I reject that notion.
Yes,
Most of our listeners here reject that notion. I would think that killing a child is wrong. Just period. Stop. But in a world where a baby can literally have magic powers, and it's just a different question. I'm not saying the answer is different, but the working through the problem is very different. And it's I find that very interesting to consider these moral questions, these philosophies, and adding in these fantastical elements. And like you said, you can apply it to the real world. Looking at the racial tension between humans and elves is applicable in a lot of ways to real world racial tensions and prejudices. And Sapkowski absolutely 100% intends for them to be that way. You listen to interviews with him, listen to him talk. He's very
well, don't forget,
unashamed about it.
He is from Poland, and he was when Hitler was rising into power. He's an older guy, people, so he understands what was happening in Nazi Germany and Poland and all of that region. And certainly, you see some of those elements. Certainly, with I don't want to compare Nilfgaard to Nazi Germany, but obviously their empire is very strong. I don't want to spoil.
Yeah, they wear all black, and they they don't treat human life very. Yeah, there's some similarities.
Yeah, we saw some of those arguments being made for Daenerys Targaryen, certainly at the end of the season with and just this hereditary power, this idea of power. That's certainly something that's going to be explored a lot. And that's why I think this doing the lesser evil in the first episode, it had to be like that, because it showed the reason why Geralt is called the Butcher of Blaviken. He had to make this impossibly difficult choice. Did he kill someone who is almost like himself and Renfrey and give power to Stregobor? Or did he stop people from being like, does he save the people in this market and stop Renfrey because she's unable to get over from the revenge that this tragedy that she's experienced?
Yeah.
So it's just so friggin' sad, and that thread definitely continues.
I love you're right that's a great thing that they start with that, because you're right. This moral conundrum of where do you draw the line? Are you worse by not choosing? That's one of that's a certain concept we're introduced to. Geralt's like, oh, it's better to just not choose, and then right away he's put in a situation where he decides it's not better to not choose. And he realizes that's a philosophy that's hard to actually apply to the real world a lot of times, because you can't just not, like, staying out of things is not necessarily the right thing to do. That doesn't make you good or better. And he doesn't necessarily think it makes him good or better. It's just his way of handling the way the world treats him, because obviously the world is not kind to Witchers either. Yeah. And he's kind of lonely. He's doesn't have friends until Jaskier comes around, and even that's a troubled friendship from time to time. They have their issues. It's like a lot of friendships, but still, it's a very interesting scenario where you have these type of characters that are very powerful, but also very detached and lonely, and don't have a legacy or a home or a family and things like that. And that's really difficult and interesting to consider.
Well, the one thing I think is interesting too is this kind of black and white that they first present us with the Cintra versus the Empire of Nilfgaard, and they certainly have the more graying of characters throughout the season. And I wanted to kind of relate back to what you were just talking about, and this is the argument that actually Geralt makes to Queen Calanthe in episode 7 when he's like, "Listen, if you leave Ciri here, I just saw the Empire of Nilfgaard. You got to choose the lesser evil and give her to me because I can protect her." And then we have the law of surprise on top of that, the destiny, the the talking into existence of this this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that happens throughout the Witcher series. So that's the argument that the Geralt the Witcher makes to Queen Calanthe, and then obviously she lies and she makes these decisions, and we can debate within ourselves whether that ended up affecting what happened to the Empire of Cintra ultimately with what we saw in the first episode. So it is kind of jumbled because we have to jump back to figure out more about it. And I think that's what ultimately people were saying, well, okay, I see the consequences later, but I think they had to kind of tell these stories and show more of the world to show that, hey, okay, like at first we think the Empire of Nilfgaard is just this like this Roman Empire that's just kind of steamrolling everything. But we do see kind of, and with the Derek conversation with Ciri, especially, he's like, your grandmother like slaughtered my whole village.
And at first she's just like in denial. She's like, no, she didn't. He's like, yeah, she did.
And then we see then when like the anti-elven attitudes that we talked about earlier, when she's like, oh my god, like Cintran flags, and she's going through the forest, and then she sees the guys with all the elven ears. She's like, I had to do my part.
So that is really interesting. You get caught. All these characters are caught between two sides, and neither side is right. They both committed atrocities, and they're both just full of people that just want to go about their business and have regular lives and have families and kids and not hurt anybody. But that's not exactly possible for a lot of reasons. This is a fair comparison to a lot of other fantasy novels or even not fantasy, just historical fiction or the real world where people.
I mean, look at today.
Want to live in peace.
Well, look 2 days ago, people were scared that a bunch of American troops are going to have to go in Iran and fight Donald Trump's idiotic war in the Middle East again. I'm not going to get too much into that because I don't want to just, offend anyone in case, whatever. But that argument, you know what I mean? Smaller people being affected by bigger people's decisions and ultimately having to fight their wars. It's something that we see, like you said, in so many different stories. And it will be talked about forever. And
it's so very personal, and like you said, the thing with deciding whether Ciri is going to go with Geralt or stay with Calanthe or what have you, so much of that is, it's like half of the consideration for both of them is her safety, but the other half is what they want. Like Calanthe just wants to keep Ciri because that's her granddaughter. Like you can understand that. Like of course that's her granddaughter. Of course she wants to keep her and raise her and be with her. Like that's very human. But there's also these massive political and more than political, like world-changing magical stuff going on that's just getting started as far as a plot. But then Geralt, also from a very human perspective, he's a lonely dude with no ability to procreate, and he's like, I can have a kid to take care of. That's like, it's something he never thought was possible for him, and all of a sudden he's like, wow, I can kind of. He's not a dad, but he's sort of a dad.
We hear him argue with Yennefer, and that's part of the reason why he loses her. He's like, do you really think you would make a good mom? Like, we're always in danger. Like, I don't think that we should be carrying some baby around. And we see the consequence ultimately, with the super sad moment what happens with Yennefer in episode 4, Thankless Passes and Burials, the excessive portal jumping, and then another thing, this king being affronted by his wife Queen Callis not being able to provide him with a male heir. So this idea of keeping power, hereditary monarchy, all these underlying issues are kind of woven in. I love
it. Should we talk? Should we try to maybe break down some of these confusing plot elements? Because I agree that is, like you said, that's some people are confused but like it anyway. Some people spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. Some people have read the book, that helps a lot, and some people just kind of threw their hands up and went, I don't understand what's going on, never mind. so there's a variety of takes.
Hello for people watching on Facebook. Thank you. We're kind of doing StreamYard lets you multicast, so what's up to people on Facebook. We will be taking some questions from the chat after, for sure. So me and Aziz will kind of go into kind of some analysis, and then we'll do like an open discussion after we're done kind of our main analysis. We'll definitely take some questions from chat. I know some of you from Witcher Addicts and Patreon and all that have some. So Witcher, where do you want to start, Aziz? I'm kind of cool with whatever. Where do you want to start with this?
Why don't we break down the basic timeline of the 3 main characters and then the main political events, and then we can kind of spice in some of the detail as we move through each kind of milestone. And I've got a resource here that is, well, it's not my resource clearly, but I highly recommend y'all go to witchernetflix.com. There's a map, an interactive map with a timeline.
You want to put the link in the chat, Aziz, so people can check it out, maybe follow with that?
Great idea.
It just came out recently. Was it like today or yesterday? It was just like a couple days ago, right?
Yes, it's very new. I know that I think this is a product of the kind of thing that if they knew the show would have been was going to be a big hit in advance, it would have already been up. But this is one of those things they're like they're spending more money on the show.
Well, they can't spoil people before the season either, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that too. But just because the show is doing so well, they're like, well, let's continue to add more stuff for people to dig into. But it's really nice. It's this beautiful map that has raindrops falling on it, and all throughout you can find little spots to click on. There's like monsters on the map you can click on, and it describes those monsters. But more importantly, it has the timelines of like when everyone was born and when these major events happen and how they line up with the TV show. Okay, so if we go really far back, this is fun. The conjunction of the spheres is this very mysterious event that kind of starts everything off. It's not very explained. Even in the books, it's not super well explained.
It's actually in relation to what Stregobor talks about.
Yeah,
doing with the mages. That's why they were hunting down the women. The curse of the Black Sun. I'll actually talk about that a little bit after what you talk about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just going to give a bit. I just want to be very basic with it. It's sort of like the website describes it. I'll just use this description because it's pretty simple and to the point. Inexplicable event that led to the arrival of humans and monsters on the continent, leaving the land forever changed. And that wasn't that long ago. Like if you're thinking of like Middle Earth or Westeros, you got massive time scales,
15,000
and thousands of years. This conjunction of the spheres event was only like 1,300 or some years ago. Not that long in terms of historical length of time. And especially considering like guys like Geralt and Yennefer are roughly like almost 100 years old. So
because we're in like the year, like we start off the story in like the year 1244, 45, I believe.
I think that's right. I think Geralt is born in 1160.
Yeah. And
you're right. And then the Butcher of Blaviken incident is in 12.
I think it's 50
something or 40 something.
Yeah. Yes, it's
31, 1231. Okay. So he's 71 when that happens, which tells you a lot about the slow aging of Witchers and stuff, which is the making of Witchers and how that all works is certainly something they'll get into later in the show. I imagine it has hardly been touched on at this point. But so fast forward to apparently roughly the year 500-ish. Or 786. 786, that's when Stregobor is born. So that shows you how old that guy is. He's very old.
I hate him.
Yeah, he's kind of a jerk, isn't he? But then there's fast forward to 967. That's the creation of the first Witcher. So Geralt's 200 years after that. And then we have the year 1167, which was the Great Cleansing, as referred to by King Filavandrel of the End of the World, who used to be king of the Silver Towers. And that's when elves gave humans a lot more additional insight into magic or chaos.
Chaos, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge event. And of course, humans repaid that by slaughtering elves en masse. And that's a thing that has related in massive tension back and forth ever
kind of like the first men and what happened with the Children of the Forest, if you're a Game of Thrones fan.
Good point. Yeah, or just that's a great point or great comparison. Then we move forward to 1192, which is the birth of Yennefer. So she's a little bit younger than Geralt, but she's up there.
Not by much. Yeah.
Not by much. And so she attends Aretuza. Those scenes from episode 2. That's when she's about 14, and she transforms 4 years later. So she spends about 4 years at Aretuza in her training. So it's a pretty long. I'm not sure if the show fully captures how long she was there. It's implied it's a while because she's teaching magic. She's learning magic. You got to feel like it's been a while, but I don't think they don't give you a sense of whether it's a few months or a few years or 10 years. So it's good to know that it's about 4 years. So maybe, and then 4 years after that, for like a few months rather. After that is when they do the choosing, and she does her move where they're going to send her to
the enchantments.
she switches things up and makes her move. So let's pause there maybe and talk about some of that beginning stuff before I don't want to just rush through the whole thing.
so some of the things that get lost, I think one thing that we should talk about is that wasn't Yennefer's real dad. That was
right.
So Yennefer's father was actually killed in the Great Purge, the Great Cleansing. So she
because of his half elven blood, right?
Yeah, and she's like, be damned, my elven blood caused me to be like this, and all that kind of stuff. We get that kind of sentiment as we find out more in the season, certainly. But that is super important too, because that's part of the reason why Stregobor and Istredd want him. Stregobor's like, listen, elven blood, and we certainly know with what we saw in Ciri in episode 1 and Pavetta in episode 4, that elven blood causes you to have a much stronger connection to magic.
Yes,
that is and Tisea had been watching her. I think that's a little bit easier to understand in the books, their connection, but they had to do it quickly as an origin story type of deal for episode to be like, okay, this is why she went and got her and all that.
There's a strong implication that becomes more of a plot line later, and you can see why, that a lot of these mages have been following these bloodlines. They've been tracking where this blood go, like who married
especially Stregobor.
Yeah, clearly, because he was in that first episode. You show that he was tracking the bloodline of 60 different girls that had this curse of the black, or may have been affected by the curse of the Black Sun.
Girls that were born under this eclipse.
Yeah, and that's something to be aware of as a general world building note for this. If you look at if you look at J.R.R. Tolkien, he wasn't breaking tropes because there weren't really tropes yet. It was a new fantasy. Fantasy was kind of new, so he was establishing tropes, as much as anything. And someone like George R. Martin loves to invert tropes by reducing the amount of magic or changing expectations or lowering things or doing things unexpectedly. Sapkowski's one of his way of inverting tropes is to go over the top with it, to lean into it really heavily, but play with it after that point. Like, in other words, you alluded to this earlier. Every monster or creature that you can imagine, unicorn, dragon, ghoul, leshy, vampire, werewolf, whether you've heard of it, whether you haven't heard of it, it's in this world. But they're not like major parts of the plot necessarily. They're just out there. They're just part of the world, and they can occasionally pop up and impact the plot in minor ways, maybe sometimes occasionally in more major ways. But I think that's really neat. It's like, rather than try to keep the magic down, because the magic is it's so tempting to use magic to make plot resolutions really easy, to use it to get past. Sometimes it's a crutch for writers to make things easier. You don't have to explain magic. You don't have to explain it.
Well, we saw George R. R. Martin especially set limits on that, like clear consequences to what happens when you surpass a certain level of that. And I think Sapkowski, oh damn, I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing that one forever, I think. But yeah, you're right, Aziz. He kind of, and that's the unabashedly great high fantasy thing about The Witcher. That's definitely different than Game of Thrones. There's this more of this there isn't as much of a history to all these monsters and stuff. They're just there, and they're part of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it's kind of neat. Like, there are explanations maybe, but they are not necessarily, maybe they'll come some other time. But it's more of how do you make this world, how do you make a world with all this magic and monsters and fairy tale stuff? How do you make it feel authentic? And that's the big challenge that Sapkowski bit off. And I think he did a great job with it, because that is hard to do. A lot of authors have shied away from that because they're like, it's hard to tell human stories when there's fireballs and dragons flying around. It's like everybody's just too busy trying to survive and deal with forces that are way more powerful than they are. So part of the way you get around that is you make the characters themselves have some of these powers. Like, you have Geralt is unbelievably good at fighting. I mean, like all the Witchers are, but and even this may not be clear to everyone. Witchers are really good at fighting. That should be clear to everybody. But Geralt is really good at fighting, even for a Witcher. So that, like, he's an exceptional Witcher, and Witchers are really, really exceptional, magically modified mutant guys. So that's something important to know. That's kind of why he's a little bit famous, even though Witchers are not, like, as a concept, Witchers aren't popular with the rest of
we
humanity.
we get nods of that throughout the season when we hear, when he's in Temeria, when he's got the courtesan in his bed, and she's like, oh, I know which song this one is from. Is this one from a princess? You know what I mean? So we have that kind of, Jaskier is singing his ballads, but they're really these warped fairy tales of Geralt.
Yeah, it's so subtle. I love that. It's like I feel bad when people, because it is a little confusing, but if you spend time thinking about the plot, and I guess that's a flaw with the Netflix model. I think that we got the same timeline chicanery with Westworld, and people didn't hate it because they had a week each time to think about it and talk it out with their friends, and it was rewarding to figure out. But with Netflix, you're just like, next episode. Well, you don't stop. You don't think about it, and that throws people off. And it's like, I wish we were forced to take a little time between each episode to talk it out, because it would be more right now. Yeah, let's do that. Let's
talk about this right now, because me and you had our hot tub discussion. No, we weren't naked together like Geralt was at Con of Thrones last year, and it was me and Robert and Aziz. We were in the hot tub just talking like strategy, YouTube, and just for like content creator wise. When Game of Thrones was on and it came every Sunday, a guy like me who wants to, like Aziz does longer videos, they're more probably well thought out than mine. I was doing more daily videos, and that triggers the algorithm, but I was able to do subject matter. Like I can talk about, Tyrion's decision making, for example, on Monday, and then, Sansa's plotline on Tuesday, and I can kind of stretch out talk about all of these plot points throughout the 5 or 6 days of the week. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think part of the reason why some of the timeline stuff happened is first of all, how fast people watch everything, like through like your first watch, or if you're watching it all in one day, there's chances are your attention span is not going to be as high during a specific episode as it was for the first one. When you might be watching more clearly, you were like, oh, okay, like what the hell is going on? So I think that argument has to be made. But as content creators, Netflix, listen to me. And I know there's people that made this article. I've seen a couple articles. I think it would benefit highly. And look at The Mandalorian, right? Like The Mandalorian, like just search engine wise, Google, YouTube, like people talking about it helps it out so much. Like during Game of Thrones season 8, YouTube broke records for the amount of people that were watching videos. Like, I'm not even that good of a content creator, and I had 2 1 million hit videos. You know what I mean? In 1 week.
Like we literally, what do we do? What were we doing during the Mandalorian season? Every like Thursday night or Friday morning, be like, Happy Baby Yoda Day. It was like an event. Imagine if we were just like, Happy Witcher, toss a coin to your Witcher Day, or whatever you want to call it.
Toss a coin to your YouTuber.
Netflix.
But me and you have talked about that, and I think that I don't think they're going to change it, but I think they should consider it specifically for
YouTube should bribe them. YouTube should give them several mil to be like, look, we make more money when you guys space your episodes out, so we'll kick some of that to you.
Another guy that was talking about this on Twitter was Joe Magician. I saw one of his tweets, and he's like, I would love to cover The Expanse. I would love to cover The Witcher, but I simply, as a content creator who is a one-man show, like myself. Well, I got some help now, but you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to just, when it all drops at once, to be like, okay, well, everybody is watching at their own speed. Like, some people might watch one episode a week to make it stretch, but the chances are 90% of people are not doing that. So as a content creator, if I want to do a review for each specific episode, this is not going to work. I'm doing that anyways. I'm taking my time because I love it so much, and I want to give a proper lens into what I feel is good analysis, but it's just like, it's so hard, man.
It's a big challenge. Yeah, it's funky. But but the thing that started this little subtopic was talking about Geralt and Jaskier, and how what the timeline confusion throws off something that's really subtle that you were just describing, which is that Jaskier is like, hey man, you got a bad reputation now because of the Butcher of Blaviken, and he doesn't even realize at first that Geralt doesn't like that term, and that's why Geralt punched him. He's like, look, don't call me that. I hate that phrase. But then he kind of admits, like, yeah, I kind of am. I don't like that name, but I do kind of deserve it. He feels bad about it. He beats himself up internally over that. And so Jaskier's like, look, man, I'm a bard. If I make some songs about you, they'll catch on, and that'll help your reputation. And so two things about that. One, like you said, the sex worker he's with is like, I've heard songs about some of your adventures, and you have to realize that must have been from Jaskier. But if you don't take the time to think about it, that flies over your head. It's a wonderful little detail to realize that so much time has passed. Like that scene where he's with that girl is like 10 years or 6 years later than him meeting Jaskier. So Jaskier's been traveling around singing songs about Geralt, and they've caught on. And you can see why they've caught on, because the freaking Toss a Coin to Your Witcher song is so catchy. In real life, of course, it would catch on there.
when he's covered in sulky morgoths, he's like, toss a coin to your Witcher, and then they all do it. And by the way, there's a debate in chat. Sanrixian just made a donation, and Bernie, I see your comment down there, and they're challenging who can sing Toss a Coin better, Aziz or Kyle. We'll do 10 seconds since Sanrixian donated. Toss a coin to your Witcher, oh Valley of Plenty, oh. Toss a coin to Azor Hive. Okay, Aziz, go ahead.
Toss a coin to your Witcher, oh Valley of Plenty, oh Valley of Plenty, oh. Toss a coin to your Witcher, a friend of humanity. So fun. Now we all just reset the stickiness in our head. We're all like, we were all about to have it fall off. Now you just got another 2 weeks of it in your head because of that.
We actually gain viewers. Usually when I sing, we lose viewers, but we gain 2. So.
It's a little trick of the algorithm there.
Oh, shut up, Bernie. Wrong notes. But we might, I actually sang in my episode 4 review. Actually sang at the end. I actually wrote a little song. If you go back and watch it. But thanks for the donation.
So of course, you guys, I hope you all have seen the many Mandalorian videos of him, Baby Yoda turning the music on and getting shut off. There is one for Toss a Coin to Your Witcher. The mashup is there. So. Hey,
like there's all these like classic hip hop songs.
So good, good. They knew what they were doing. They were like, this scene's gonna get memed.
Okay, people say Aziz won. You guys are dicks. Fuck. But back to the discussion. We gained 2 more viewers. You're saying it must have been great. Feel free to toss more coins, by the way, everyone. We love that. But so the timeline thing, it's so interesting, right? Like how Jaskier kind of fuels this, and especially the fairy tales, which we're going to talk about, which I think we should talk about right now.
Sure.
The fairy tale influence, like it does enrich the world in a way. And it's kind of like when characters talked about Rhaegar and Lyanna in the background in Game of Thrones. Like that's how, for a TV show, that's how you're informed, as people and characters talking about, or like, for example, Barristan Selmy, when he told, the story to Daenerys Targaryen about how Rhaegar loved singing in the streets. And there's all these other stories about how Rhaegar Targaryen was this terrible person. But then we hear other people that just love Geralt, like, oh yeah, we know this guy. Like he killed this monster. he helped our town. Like, and that's kind of a cool way to fill in the world, especially for a TV show when you can't put all the source material, even though it is a pretty faithful adaptation.
Yeah, it's very strong. And like you said, there's some things they have to cut and some things they have to change. And like, for example, anytime, like we alluded to this earlier, you have Geralt's inner thoughts are a big part of the books, but so are so many of the characters in Game of Thrones. You just have to change that. You have to do that a different way. Like hopefully you find good actors like who can show conflict on their face.
Well, Joey Beatty is so talented. He actually plays the lute for real.
Oh, really? I figured he was, because I'm a music. I got my degree in music, so you can kind of tell when someone's faking, and it looked authentic, but I couldn't tell. Maybe he was just doing a good job of faking, because I don't know the lute very well. I know other instruments, but
classical guitar.
Yeah. So that's really neat. So like, I've been working on how to say this properly, but something that I would maybe I'll have better, more succinct thoughts when I'm completely finished with the books. But it really feels like Sapkowski's writing a love letter to storytelling, to all the forms of storytelling. You've got not only you've got this non-linear storytelling that we have, but but that changes. And I don't mean it changes in that he stops doing it. I mean, he does non-linear, non-algorithmic storytelling in different ways. And I won't say how. That's fun to discover that on your own. And I'm curious how the show's going to adapt that. But he just loves to play with all the different types of storytelling that have existed throughout human history. He tries to include homages and nods and versions of all of that, whether it's fairy tales, whether it's fireside camp tales, whether it's historical fiction, historical mysteries, whether it's people asking for bedtime stories from their parents, whether it's kids telling other kids their version of stories. It's every version.
War. We get the Roman Empire vibe with Nilfgaard, all that stuff too. So
yeah, so I just love that. It's really neat to me that he just leans into he just wants to tell you all the different versions of storytelling that he loves and fits them into his novels and makes them part of it. So it's very well done, and I'm curious to see how the show's going to adapt some of those homages, some of that love. Well, because I think that's true for a lot of us. We all love different versions of storytelling.
Well, we have the warp storytelling. Like we have like a little bit of a Cinderella vibe when Yennefer arrives and she's like, got her glass slipper taken in by the king. She's taken in as a court mage, that kind of thing. We kind of got a little bit of a Snow Whitey vibe with Renfrey, and we obviously got we got the incest story with a Foltest and Ada, and then the Striga that can kind of be a little bit Snow Whitey. So there's all these different, and then Beauty of the Beast. Like that's the hedgehog hedge knight joke that I made in my video that me and Thomas thought up for our episode 4 review.
A+ pun there.
Yeah, but yeah, that is one of the great parts, and I think why a lot of people that so the hardcore fans, there's a lot of people that are getting into this. I know a lot of you in the chat are just starting or getting into it, but I think that's the best part of the short stories for me, is that we're able to kind of make these connections to our childhood and stories that we've been told or learned about through, that we've really enjoyed through our kind of our own love for content, whatever it may be, Disney, wherever we learn these stories when we were younger.
And he has this way of doing that while also keeping it serious but also maintaining kind of a lighthearted tone a lot of times. You know that you feel danger for your characters. You wonder, you worry that certain characters could be in harm's way or could die. So you still have that, you maintain this level of, people could get killed, characters I care about could die. But you also have this sort of playful, like I laughed out loud reading the books more times than I can think of. Like that's just really funny. I'd go run off and tell Shay this really funny joke, blah blah blah.
Torque from the End of the World is one of my favorites.
Or one of the jokes that they didn't carry over. This is an extremely minor spoiler. It's not a spoiler. It's just a joke that's in the books about the Striga. Okay, so you guys have seen the Striga scene in the books. There's this really funny moment where it's the same thing where they're like, Foltest is a little sensitive about this. Don't call it a Striga. Maybe call it the princess, because that's what in the books they already know it's the princess. It's a little slightly different. So Geralt's like, can you give me another description of the princess? And Foltest just leaps up and he's like, she looks like a Striga. She's the Striga you've ever seen. It's just like
it's really good.
The most Striga you've ever. It's like Strigish. That's a word.
I just want to get a quick show of hands in chat. How many people do not have The Last Wish in chat? If everyone can kind of just tell me in chat, that would be awesome. Who doesn't have the first book, The Last Wish? And then, it's just we talked about character creation earlier. George R. R. Martin has specific characters that he injects comedy or certain types of
comic relief characters like Dolorous Ed and
Tyrion is certainly an example.
Tyrion,
and then we have the more magical elements, of course, for Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons and Jon Snow and the Starks and stuff like that. So Sapkowski has a nice balance of these characters, and he's really, really good at threading the needle of when to have comedy and when to have the more serious elements of the story. There's a really nice balance of that. And
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Like Game of Thrones, like I'm gonna admit something here. At the end of Game of Thrones season 8, like I was like fucking depressed. Okay, like seriously, like when you like, especially as content creators for me and Aziz, when you invest so much into something and like you feel for these people's endings, especially for Jon Snow. For me, like just like the end, like I just wish he had, like I know and he's gonna find a little bit of happiness in the end. I just wish that he had a better life. You know what I mean? And I know the books will be different, but still it affects you. You know what I mean? And I think that at the end of Game of Thrones, that's just the way I felt about it. And it fucking broke me.
Yeah, it wasn't even how it ended. Like if it had ended that way and people just liked it more, that would have been fine. But just like when you're kind of carrying water for something that a lot of people, even just forgetting like our own opinions on it, doesn't even matter. I mean, like you said, it's just how other people were so disappointed was like, yeah. You know, you don't want to tell them they're wrong. Like I can't tell someone they're wrong for being disappointed. So you just kind of like got to ride that wave, and that wave was not so pleasant. So
like they're like, you definitely feel, and I know a lot of people have made comparisons of that Geralt, pardon me, is a nice mix of Jon Snow and Ned Stark. I don't want to kind of do character painting like that. But it is there's I mean, definitely you feel specific moments of sadness. Like there's a lot of emotion in the books, but like I said, there is a lot more comedy than you think in The Witcher. And a lot, like you said, there was a lot of times where I found myself, and in the video games too, there's like just like quests, and I'm like, are they serious? Like this is just completely absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really surprisingly funny without being silly. Like because and that's part of it, has that ability because it leans into the fairy tale aspect so much, is that whimsical stuff fits the setting, even though it's doesn't seem like it could fit a serious setting, and you know, like with all these like kind of harsh aspects of these characters that are very kind of, lots of brutality and bluntness and stuff like that, but also you have the whimsy. It's interesting how it can all be balanced like that. I wouldn't have thought it was possible.
What was your favorite episode, Aziz? Like for mine was Betrayer Moon. It's really interesting because that's the epilogue of The Last Wish as well. So
I'm not sure, to be honest, because it's another problem of the watching them all so close together. Is it's difficult to pick which is which, you know, as a separate entity. But I think it might be either episode 7 or
I know you like the story of the Golden Dragon a lot.
Yeah, I love that story. That's my favorite in the books. It lost a little something to the translation of the show, but it has
a really Lord of the Ringsy vibe.
It does.
Yeah.
I still thought it was great on TV, but there was a couple elements it lost from the show version that I was slightly disappointed. I was like, you know, like, oh darn, it didn't have that, but nothing major. So it might still be my favorite TV episode, but that's hard to say. It's a really difficult thing to pick because, like I said, they just kind of run together in my head a bit. But I really love the plot arc with the Child of Surprise and just how that all resolves and the way it merges together. But like I said, the part about episode 6 that I love so much is the coming together of Geralt, Yennefer, and villain Trenmeth, or the Golden Dragon, Sir Borch, and the way that they're kind of all on a similar path with being unable to breed, and them being lonely in their existence because there's so few people like them. Like there's very few witchers, there's not a lot of sorceresses, and there's definitely not many dragons, especially not like talking polymorphing dragons. So
the ending of that episode is so important too, because villain Trenmeth, he basically separates everyone. He's like, I gotta tell this hard truth right now, and he knows that destiny is gonna bring them back together, but he's like, okay, you guys gotta get this out of the way now, because if you don't get it out of the way now, later it's going to cause more. So there is this kind of like that is one of the important lessons too, like for Geralt and specifically Yennefer's relationship going forward.
Can I say something about destiny here?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's obviously a huge theme. Okay, so at first I was slightly turned off by the idea of so much destiny playing such a big role, but then I just realized, look, y'all, this is all fiction. Everything every author has ever made up is destiny by the sense of that author. Every character's arc is decided by an author. So the idea that there's destiny in these books is always a little bit playful. Like, it's always very meta. So he's just, that's, again, it's the same thing with the fairy tale stuff. Instead of dialing that down, he leans into it really heavily and say, hey, look, this is all just an invention anyway. So it's all just what the author decides anyway. So we may as well just not pretend and say, look, destiny is what I say it is. These characters are going to have whatever fate I say they have. And it's this. And this is fun. So there you go. And I like that he's just thumbing his nose at the concept that destiny is mysterious in these books. No, it's not. It can come off that way by an author writing it really well and putting us in the feel for that. But ultimately, it's just a decision.
It's about consequences, your decision making, and that your power of choice. One thing that I think that can relate what you were just talking about is the reveal of who ends up being the Nilfgaardian mage when we find Queen Calanthe's body, and the chaotic decision that Yennefer made, and we end up finding that Fringilla ends up being, and we see the power that her father holds within kind of the Sorcerers Guild and all of that. We find out that she becomes the Nilfgaardian mage, and Yennefer ends up serving the King of Illyria. But yeah, so we find, and we see Kay here and Fringilla working together, and that's a really interesting plot point that I don't want to spoil too much about. But I thought, the idea of chaos and destiny and all of that, ultimately it leads to what you were talking about, Aziz, the consequences of decision making and the power of choice.
Yeah, like the butterfly effect and all that. Yeah, it really gets into these small decisions leading to bigger things and having waves that ripple out for decades, if not longer, especially when you have people of power. Like, it makes sense. Like, you make a law and that's going to have consequences, far-reaching consequences. Not always, but you can, when it happens, no one's surprised. Maybe the specifics are surprising, but the fact that it has a big sweeping effect is not surprising. And so that's applied in different ways to with a little bit more of a magical feel, with a little bit more of a a little more of a design to it, but you can still see how it's got that element of randomness to it.
There's still strong differences too. Like, we see people that hail from the Isle of Skellige, like Mouthsack and Ice. They're like, listen, the law of surprise is something that's really important in our culture that we understand. Like, this is nothing to joke around about. And then we see Cintra, which is more of this kind of metropolitan, like Skellige is more of this like progressive Norse type of, I want to say that I love Skellige. That's probably my favorite.
It's really neat. Yeah, it's unusual.
But, then we see the differences between, this more like hereditary monarchy and Nilfgaard. And then we, like, I talk about Queen Calanthe again. It's played by Jodie May. And someone had mentioned that was actually, she played Maggie the Frog in Game of Thrones, which is correct. She did a terrific job. She's one of my favorite characters. And it was really nice that we got to spend, because in the short stories in the books, and this is why I highly recommend people go read them, we get to spend a lot more time with characters like Iced and Crack-on Crate and characters like that. And you get to kind of learn more little quirks about their characters and their kind of backstories. And I thought it was cool kind of how they did with the timelines.
It's kind of like in Game of Thrones, where you see like 3 seconds of Beric Dondarrion and a couple of these other characters in season 1. You're like, well, that guy seems interesting, but he's not around anymore. But then he becomes more important later. It's like that, where you get like these brief introductions to some characters, and obviously Game of Thrones is nowhere near the only production to do something like that. It's just a natural reminder, because so many of us are familiar with it, so it works as an example pretty well. But another thing I wanted to point out was the aspect of like you said, these sort of real world comparisons, like the Skellige culture is very, like you said, it's kind of like progressive Norseman, and that's true of, you can find a lot of these sort of cultures where he's just very much borrowing, and very intentionally, the very straightforward versions of real world stuff, but he's twisted it to fit his world. Like there's the realm of Toussaint is very clearly
French and Italian.
France, Italian, but during like the Arthurian era, you've got
Oh,
the most over-the-top characters saying the most ridiculous phrases. But it's all.
It is literally a
campy.
King Arthur legend kingdom. That's literally what it is.
It's so funny. I love it, but it's also
there's literally characters from lore in that kingdom from King Arthur in that story.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
You're like, what? But it works. It's like, how is this? How he's really doing? Okay, all right, it works. I love it. It's amazing. I would not have thought that could work.
and it's cool how he warps it because it makes us think of like, okay, like this idea of storytelling passed down through the ages, like banana phone. Like if someone told my great ancestors 300 years ago, the chances that the stories that they're telling are 100% accurate is probably not the case.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of what Sapkowski is doing. He's like, oh, okay, like what you thought might have been true with these fairy tales is probably not. So I'm going to kind of give my own twist and kind of like these generational tales that have been like so popular throughout history.
And he does it, and I love it. It's done from the smallest scale to the highest scale. Like we have these history is written by the winners aspect, right? Where like if Nilfgaard decides that they want to, let's say they, for example, they do all this conquering, they can write down the history the way they want, and then future generations might not know the truth of what transpired. Maybe. Well, on the other hand, you have someone like Jaskier who's singing songs, and these songs are going to be remembered for generations too. But they're not entirely truthful either, but they're definitely from a different perspective.
The song.
Yeah, so I love that you have history is remembered in a variety of ways, but they both have their flaws, some of which is, hey, we're trying, Nilfgaard or some other king or queen might change the history just a little bit to make themselves look better, whereas a singer might embellish a little to make the song sound better. So they're all like lying for their own reasons, and you can see the truth within that. You can kind of unpack it, and by comparing the different versions of these stories, you get somewhere. And that is very, very realistic, because that is absolutely how real world historians operate. They look at everything. They look at the real record, which they know is to be taken with a grain of salt. Then they look at what the lowborn and commoners were saying, if those records exist. They look at the songs, they look at the artwork, whether it's ceramic pottery or poetic verse that's somehow reached us over the centuries. You look at all those things to try to put a picture together, and Sapkowski is trying to do some of these same things, but in a high fantasy setting.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because like we have information of things that happened. I don't want to spoil too much, but like the fates of Ciri's parents, for example, that's something that's gonna play a much bigger role in the future of the show, and it does in the games. I don't want to spoil anything for everyone, but like what we're told, like we're supposed to take that, like, and then there's all these twists. There is twists like Game of Thrones, these big twists that happen. You're like, oh, this character is not exactly what we thought they were.
Yeah,
there's a lot. There's big twists.
Definitely.
And it just for me, it gets better and better with every book, and that's a really hard thing to say. And certainly, we're taking Game of Thrones up here again. Winds of Winter. Hopefully, it comes out soon. George, you said July. I'm gonna kill you if it's not. But we're all expecting that to be the best book in the series. Another Storm of Swords. So I think that and one thing that I really love, especially, is that Andrzej Sapkowski, the gentleman who wrote the Witcher series, is in direct communication with Lauren Histrich, and they want to do the best possible adaptation they can with the book material, and that's really, really encouraging. And by the way, everyone, they're already signed on for 3 seasons, which is great. Hopefully, we'll get 7 seasons, and they can tell. I think 7 seasons would probably be appropriate for telling the whole story.
I think so too, probably. Now, here, let's say something else about that. I'm
just going to grab a water, Aziz. One sec. Continue on talking.
I'll say a few things. There's something I really like about The Witcher that is a positive comparison with Game of Thrones, which is that it has a much better back end in terms of its storytelling and the way it's adapting. And what I mean by that is a really long-running flaw that Game of Thrones had was that it did not have enough women's voices in the writer's room, or almost none, really, if we're being honest. Whereas The Witcher has a female showrunner. Like, you're already way ahead of that curve. The balance is a lot stronger there, and that's important because there are so many times. I love Game of Thrones. Criticizing it doesn't mean obviously this is what I do for a living.
I think
so I'm not
me and you
trash
enjoyed
it.
Game of Thrones season 8 a lot more than other people did.
Yeah, I did. Like I enjoyed it, but I still have a huge criticisms of it. Like you can love something and criticize the hell out of it at the same time. I'm definitely one of those people. So, but it just, there were so many things that they had female characters do that were just like, if they had one woman in the writer's room, that woman would have been like, nah, y'all, don't do that. It would have fixed so many things. And that's not even like, this is a very, I'm hardly making a big point here. This is very easy to see the truth of this when you think about it. So right away, you can see that some of these quote unquote mistakes or oversights that were made in Game of Thrones are not going to happen with The Witcher, because they just have a more balanced approach with who the viewership is. They're taking account their viewers a little better by having that balance.
Also communication with the actors and actresses and the people who watch the show. I just want to jump in quickly, and then you can keep going there, Aziz. Like some of the communication with people like Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Lena Headey, like their stories, like Dan and Dave could have gained a lot by having some discussions, since we didn't have all the final book material, by having discussions with people that were already there for 7 seasons. Like, hey, how do you think this is going to go? Instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to write this. This is how it's going to be. And
these have been people who've been thinking about their characters for years. Like Nikolai Coster-Waldau thought about Jaime a lot, and Peter thought about Tyrion a lot, etc.
And then we have someone like Henry Cavill, who lobbied for the job, someone like Joey Beatty, who lobbied for his own job, and then we have someone like Lauren Hitchrich, who was literally in The Witcher Reddits 2 days ago, taking criticism from people, and she's like, if you want to criticize the show, I'm right here in the Reddit.
Yeah, that's
you know how rare that is?
That
is extremely rare. The fact that she's willing to go into Reddit, and we're talking Reddit can be as toxic as Twitter sometimes,
especially to women.
And she went in there bravely. She's like, tell me what you don't like, but don't just bash it like you know what I mean?
That's not helpful. That's not constructive. Like,
and then
you can't do anything with that. You can't work with.
When we had critic reviews out for people who skipped 4 episodes, shit like that. Like that's just like that's irresponsible.
Yeah, they're showing their ass when they do things like that. The fact that the critic reaction has been so divergent from the fan reaction is a real. I don't know. I mean, they're obviously critics are. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, but people, when fan reaction and critic reaction is this divergent, it just kind of makes me think these critics missed the point, because the fan reaction is what studios care about. Obviously,
and I guarantee
critics aren't the ones driving all the clicks, and the fact that the show is popular isn't because of critics. Obviously,
I guarantee that a lot of these critics are going to walk that back in season 2 with a more succinct storyline, concise storyline. I think they're going to be like, oh, okay, like we were like season 1 had to be like this. Now we understand why they had to do some of this timeline jumping. I think that a lot of people are going to, I expect season 2 to be better than season 1. Not that I'm saying that season 1 isn't good. It definitely has its flaws, but I think that there's going to be that discussion that's going to be after season 2 when it comes out. It's going to be like, oh, okay, this is why they made specific creative choices for this specific plot line.
Yeah, so a good example of what I was talking about is with Calanthe. Calanthe is a great example of a different kind of female portrayal that a lot of showrunners or shows have been shy or just flat out not willing to do, which is a woman that's just not just, first of all, they introduce her, she seems like a good guy, but then later you realize that she's very gray. She's good and bad, like she's a mix like everybody else. So this is a very authentic portrayal of a person she's a sword fighter. She like, you can imagine her like burping and farting. It's not like, it's just not like prissy or like with restrained in that kind of way. She does what she wants, and she is not apologetic about it. And it is not, we do not see portrayals like that of women very often, and a lot of people are like, yes, it's not necessarily something people want to emulate, but it's good that we get it, because it should be part of the general pastiche of characters that we see on TV. And it's like, yeah, we get something like that finally.
Specific cookie cutter molds of like our archetypes that we've seen played out through.
Yeah, I can't think of a character like Calanthe on like on a TV show. Like books really,
Yeah.
I can't think of one either, but especially TV, like that kind of portrayal. And that's
She
great.
reminds me a lot of Tyrion, actually.
Yeah, and there's no freaking boob armor. Like, thank you. You know, like, not that Game of Thrones did that for everyone. Like, Brienne didn't have boob armor, but they did do it for some characters, and it's always silly when they do boob armor. And it's like, that's a good example of something that, like, like that too many dudes in a writer's room come up with stuff like that. Like, a couple of women would be like, dudes, no boob armor. Come on. No boob armor.
Well, you know, let's talk about this, Aziz, because like I mentioned earlier in our live stream, I talked a little bit about the creative choice that Lauren was going to have and making Ciri the main POV, but then she decided ultimately, because in the books, like you said, Geralt's gone for mostly of this one book, and Ciri's the most important character, but Geralt's the most important character. But for her decision to make these 3 main protagonists and 2 of them be women and them be fantastic, it's like, okay, now you can start to really shine the light on what Sapkowski's trying to do with the story, right?
And here's the thing he says. This is a real life. Here, actually, give me 3 seconds to find this quote, and it gives you a great idea of the kind of person Sapkowski is. I believe that the feminine element dominates in nature. Women are generally stronger than men. All power of this world should be in the hands of women. Life, the world are too serious to leave it in our hands. That's an actual quote from the author of The Witcher. So this is not something that he's leaned into recently. This is just, he's just kind of feels this way about women, you know, and kind of always has.
I'll give another example of this. 90% of the Republican Party is white men over 40. And then we look at the Democratic Party. I'm not saying that I love both of them, because I distrust politicians to begin with. But if you look at it, the progressiveness is quite different. You'll see it's like they got like 30 to 40% more diversity within that party. So the fact that you're seeing Sapkowski do that with the story with women, you know, we're seeing more women have voices. You can definitely see the clear differences of policy making and all that kind of stuff that we're seeing within the world now. And that's kind of the point that what you're saying Sapkowski is trying to do. Like, women are just maybe a little bit more level-headed than men and less aggressive in nature in general.
That's a phrase that comes up in the books. He says something along the line of male ambition is the problem for like so many issues in the world. And it's like, you know, maybe that's a little over the top, but the idea is the consideration of the idea is very apt.
We see that highlighted in the conversation with Villain Trinamith and Yennefer and Geralt, where Geralt loses Yennefer. That's one of the big ones. That's one of the big examples.
And that's just, maybe this is a little bit off the point, but it's another part of that short story I love, which is he talks about, okay, so we see that Geralt won't kill dragons because they're intelligent. Like, that's established by the time episode 6 comes around, that he doesn't kill intelligent monsters. He didn't kill Torque. He won't kill people when he doesn't have to, for the most part. There's exceptions, but a dragon is an intelligent creature. And so there's this wonderful debate in the books, this tiny spoiler here, I guess, where one guy's like, look, dragons should be killed off. You should kill dragons. Like, humans are threatened by dragons. And Geralt's like, no, they're intelligent beings. You shouldn't, you know, that's it. It's simple as that. He's like, look, yes, dragons are intelligent. Maybe you can make an argument that they have a right to life just as much as we do. But the fact is, Witcher, you go around killing these beasts that are less problematic than a lot of humans, because most monsters don't torture people. They just kill and eat. They don't make humans suffer. They don't cause a lot of the problems. They are very problematic, obviously, but they don't cause the worst monsters. Don't cause nearly the problems as the worst people, for example, right? Like, the biggest, most dangerous monster that's ever lived won't cause as much problem as, say, the Emperor of Nilfgaard. Like, or that guy is
Queen Calanthe. We see how it affected Pavetta. Right, in episode 4, that was a huge thing, right? Like, she was crying. She's like, this monarchistic, aggressive society. Like, oh, you're just gonna set me up with someone I don't even love. And then it turns out she ends up loving this person for who they like. We see the Hedge Knight making that joke again. We see that highlighted in episode 4, and that's part of the reason she has the reaction that she does.
So there's this, right? That's really well said. So there's this wonderful lean in onto like a very human aspect that we all deal with, which is that we worry about what other people are capable of doing to us, not whether they're willing to, not whether they will, just what they're capable of doing to us. Like if another country gets nukes, whether or not they are ever willing to do it is a side question. Just the fact that they can nuke us is terrifying to a lot of people. And that comes up here. And that's what's coming up with that dragon story, which is that some humans think that all dragons should be wiped out because the dragon is the only monster capable of destroying a city. Ghouls, goblins, vampires, werewolves, name it. They can kill a few people at a time. They're a nuisance on the grand scale of civilization, but a dragon can wipe out a whole city. But Geralt's like, yeah, but they don't do that. They don't want to do that. They never want to do that. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. They're capable of doing that. It could change. One day a dragon could come and burn all the city down. That's why they have to die. But so it's an interesting philosophical argument that applies to the real world. It's like, yeah, but they're not going to. But one day they might. And it's like, well, you can't entirely say they're wrong. One day they might. That is actually true. But that doesn't mean we have a right to kill them. But you can't just say, nah, they'll never do that either. That's not really. So it is a kind of a conundrum. And I find that a really interesting conflict.
It also kind of highlights human behavior. And I think this is what Sapkowski does a lot, is like these geopolitical issues that we have, and like how humans are scared of what they don't understand. And they act like a lot of what they have with elves end up teaching them all of these really important things, and then because they're different, they end up killing them.
It's backfires, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I think that, and we see a lot of that what's happening with nature. Like, look at climate change. I mean, Australia is fucking incinerated right now. Sadly, knock on wood. I have friends that live there, and I know you do as well. We both share mutual friends that live there. Sorry. I think that, just the highlight, and he weaves these important, stronger points in the story so nicely. And I think that's what we're trying to highlight here, man. Just like, it's people read the books. You got to read the book. I know a lot of people will.
I'm definitely pushing it. I'm definitely trying to encourage people to read it because I want more people to read to pick up on these things and geek out with us on them. Like a lot of it's in the show, but it's it's going to be 2021 probably till season 2 comes out, so it'll be a little.
Well, they're saying early 2020, 21, which is great. Maybe they'll do more episodes too. That would be great. I don't know. Like it was 8 episodes.
Yeah, maybe they could do 10 this time.
10. That would be great. And the episodes were like an hour long.
Yeah, they were lengthy. Right. They were long. They were a good average length. I feel like it was about 8 hours is pretty long for. Even though like 8 episodes isn't a lot of episodes, but 8 hours is a lot of hours. So,
so for everyone that's here, we're going to go on for, you got like another 20 minutes, Aziz, you're cool for that? And then
that's good. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So everyone that's here, I'm actually doing, I spoke a little bit about The Last Wish earlier, and I'm doing a giveaway for 2 copies of the last, I'm doing a copy for 2 books. Some people have read the earlier books, but I'm actually doing a giveaway on the Witcher Addicts Facebook page. And there's some awesome people in the chat. They both embraced me and Aziz. I'm a moderator on the Facebook page. So they're letting me do events, and we're trying to grow this community, and they're like cool with like bringing their community to our YouTube community. So that's really cool. So anybody that's in the live chat right now, if you go join the Witcher Addicts, it's in the announcements section. If you go comment and you go join up with the Witcher Addicts, you will get entered into a giveaway. And I just love the book so much. I've loved The Witcher for years and years and years. I've been playing the games and reading the book since 2015. Actually, 2014 probably. I know The Witcher came out in 2015, but I played the other games and the books earlier then. But I want to just kind of involve everyone, just so it's fair. I have a giveaway on the Witcher Addicts Facebook. And I don't know if Shelby is still in the chat. I think I see Stacy Meyer in here. If you want to post a link in there. But yeah, I want to do a giveaway, and I just want more people to get into The Witcher. It's, I don't know if a lot of people know, I haven't been making as many videos, but this is going to be kind of the main focus of the content on the channel, with some kind of expanse stuff sprinkled in until we get to the kind of the next Game of Thrones stuff. So, mainly Witcher videos. That's how much I love The Witcher. So, really exciting. Anybody that's in the live chat that wants to participate in the giveaway, if you've already got The Last Wish, you can pick out another book if you end up winning. That way, it's fair for everyone. But the Witcher Addicts on Facebook, that's where the giveaway is in the announcement section. So yeah, where should we go next? We've talked about themes, mythology. I thought, you brought up the conjunction of spheres. I don't think we want to spoil too much of that, but that's really interesting. And we hear, obviously, I kind of want to talk about this point. Stregobor talk about these 60 girls that were born during this time. And one thing that I pointed out in my episode review, I don't know if many of you have seen it, but Pavetta and Dooney were at the center of all of these different spheres. That's where they were actually married. Okay. When after Pavetta has her big explosion in her magic thing. So
release. Yeah.
so symbolically, Dooney and Pavetta are at the center of all these different spheres. There's all these spheres on the floor. It's this beautiful tile work. And that's really important. I don't want to spoil too much, but we see Geralt say, "Oh, I'll claim the law of supplies," and then Calanthe's like, "What the hell have you done?" And then we see Pavetta puking. You got the child of surprise thing. So that is something that if you guys, I don't want to spoil for you. Is very, very important. There's a prophecy called the White Frost, which is actually kind of cool because in Game of Thrones we have the White Walkers and the Long Night. It's kind of similar, actually. I don't want to say they're the same, but it has to do with this kind of apocalyptic, Ragnarok-y. It's a lot like Ragnarok, actually, Ragnarok-esque ending of the world, and that's kind of. If you want to go research that, I'm going to be doing some mythology videos on that very, very soon. They're spoilery, so that's why I'm encouraging people to read the books, because it does kind of give away some of the further plot that's going to be coming later on and some of the villains and stuff like that. So that is something that's super interesting about The Witcher, is this mythology, this overall mythology of the world. We didn't get too much of that in season 1. I think they're going to be saving some more of that, especially since Ciri is going to be taking center stage in season 2. But I think that's where we can kind of take our conversation now.
Okay, yeah, like why the world is the way it is and all that, and so we could back up a little. Yeah, we talk about some of the things we brought up briefly before. One of the reasons there are Witchers at all is that you have this issue of humans appearing and monsters appearing and then all of a sudden being in the same world together. And well, humans had to do this kind of a thing that happens in a lot of fantasy stories. It has a vaguely similar feel to Lord of the Rings in the sense where humans sort of just are so good at breeding, and so they spread out everywhere, and it pushes the elves and the dwarves and the gnomes and the halflings and all these other races kind of out, they're sort of pushed to the margins a bit. And the same is true for a lot of these monsters, which are, don't really have societies, but are also, have carved out niches and places in the food chain and all that. And so humanity is really troubled by all these monsters because monsters can kill humans. The humans' great advantage is our brains and our ability to breed and all that. So certain people would kind of take it on themselves to go protect the communities, but these beings that they're fighting are so difficult to fight against. Monsters are really hard to kill. So over time, you have magic is a tool that helps deal with monsters. So over time, these concepts come together, and eventually people start to use magic to permanently alter themselves. And one of the ways this is done, it's alluded to in particular episode 8, when Geralt is on the wagon and he's having all these flashbacks, and he's thinking about how only 3 in 10 Witchers, little Witcher boys, survive the trials, and how basically you find out they're given all these like herbs and magical drugs and stuff like that speeds their development, makes them
poison.
faster.
They even take poison to up their tolerance. Like some people just die from the poison.
Yeah. So like you said, 7 out of 10 boys die, which is why it's mostly orphans, because your parents wouldn't send you to that. So that's why it's part of why Geralt's, a bit downcast, is that he was abandoned by his mother and left for dead. Like how could that not affect you? Even when you're in your 90s, that's still going to be a part of who you are. And it's not like he ever, sometimes people get past that, deal with that kind of trauma of abandonment, early childhood abandonment, by starting their own family. But he can't do that because he's sterile.
And we see that in the vision too. She appears.
She appears. Yeah, so adoption is maybe the way around that, but that's kind of getting off the point here. But you see how adoption is a way around being, not being able to have kids. So so the Witchers start coming into being because of this need for humans to fight monsters, and the low survival rate of humans that go out to fight monsters. So Witchers were a societal evolution to deal with this problem on a large scale. But the timeline we're in, which is many, the Witchers are starting to die out. And there's a lot more lore to this that we won't get into, like specifics that are really interesting. But the fact is, there's fewer Witchers. He says that at the beginning. He says that to Stregobor in the first episode. He's like, I wouldn't expect to see a Witcher. He's like, well, there's not many of us left. And you can also see they're not very popular anymore. In the very first episode,
they're providing a service to humanity, and
get the hell out of here. Yeah,
like. That's part of the brilliance and why the conversation between Renfrey and Geralt is so important, because like we spoke about this earlier, this theme that human can be the worst kind of monsters, even though Witchers are providing this service to humanity. Look, same thing happened to the elves. The elves taught humans magic. The Witchers are. You don't want to be called humans. We see Geralt say, "Don't call me a human," to Filavandrel later on because of the way he's been treated by society.
Yeah, he's rejected. He feels rejected.
But we see still beneath that hardened exterior that he's still able to emote and connect to things. His capacity for love is great.
It's there. It's just been held at bay for so long. It's not a natural thing for him because it's been rejected. It's like an animal that was abused. It's not. It doesn't know to feel happiness when you're petting it. It has to learn that. And Geralt's kind of like that.
He says to Yennefer, he's like, "Fuck! I've said more. I've said to you in just a couple of minutes than I've said in weeks." Yeah. he's like, "You make me feel so good. I don't want to be weak." You know what I mean?
She's one of the closest things to a peer that he has. She's like, okay, well, you're old like me. You're unable to procreate like me. You're powerful like me. You're kind of lonely like me because you don't have a lot of people you can relate to. And interestingly, Jaskier is as well, because he's a bard. He's like also kind of lonely on a certain way because he doesn't have a lot of peers. Like, there's not a lot of people.
He manifests all these terrible relationships through sleeping around, right?
Yes, exactly. So he has that, and kind of that's one thing he has in common with Geralt is they're not good with relationships, and it's partly because of his selfishness, but part of that selfishness is a defense mechanism against how the world treats them. Like, Jaskier is rejected by a lot of people.
That's how they connect.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, we're both kind of outcasts. They're different kinds of outcasts, very different kinds of outcasts, but they are both outcasts, and that is a major thing to bond over. And that's, like I said, it's also part of why Geralt and Yennefer bond.
That's one of the best lines of the song. "I went along for a ride with Geralt of Rivia." Like, you know what I mean? He's like, "I'm along for this ride with Geralt of Rivia." That's such a great song. I imagine they're going to create a lot more catchy songs, because if he's,
I hope so.
he's going to be a mainstay for the majority of the story. I would love to see more catchy songs like that. "Toss a coin to your YouTuber." That's a great point.
So I hope they carry forward that. Yeah, I love the bond between Jaskier and Geralt is really cool, and so is the Yennefer Geralt bond, and it's built on a similar foundation. There's a lot more power dynamic between Geralt and Yennefer because they're both very powerful, but in very different ways, and that's they both have this kind of like. Geralt wants Yennefer to need him, and Yennefer is very much she's very much a no, I can do it myself kind of person.
Jaskier is more of a puppy dog.
Yeah, and Jaskier is more of a he's a musician. He needs to have an audience. He needs to have acclaim to be happy. That's part of the lot of being a performer. you got to have an audience. You got to have that love. You got to have the clapping or you wilt. And that's why he's a flower, dandelion.
The word Jaskier actually means buttercup, which is a type of flower in Polish. So, okay. some people were like, why the change? But it's just saying dandelion is similar to the buttercup flower. I believe they're both yellow. I think buttercups do grow here in Canada.
Do they?
I have to check on that. but I do know, that's because a lot of people are like, oh, why isn't it Dandelion?
Dandelion.
Dandelion from the audiobooks.
Dandelion. Yeah, it's like Brian in the Song of Ice and Fire audiobooks.
So I think this is a good time. Like we've talked about, like I think most of the main themes in the first season and kind of teased a little bit of season 2. Let's take a few questions from chat, Aziz. I got like 15 minutes before I got to go do some groceries and some cooking. And but yeah, everybody that's still here, thank you for watching. If you haven't checked out Aziz, I have all the links to his website, his podcast, and all of that in the description of the video. Aziz, you want to talk a little bit about that real quick before we get into some more? Do you want to do that kind of on the outro?
We'll just do that. Yeah, we just do that on the outro.
Okay, cool. So yeah, but if anybody is enjoying, if you're enjoying this, of course, please like the video. Anybody that's going to watch this later, leave your questions. I'm going to be doing, actually, I think this would be a great time to announce this, but I'm going to start my Witcher book club next week. I'm going to start with the epilogue and the story of the Striga and Temeria, and I think I'm going to do that next Friday. I haven't decided. I think it would probably be cool if we do the book club in a live stream format, so people can kind of talk along and we can stop and pause and ask questions and stuff like that. So I'm going to be doing a book club. Aziz is going to be a special guest. He's not going to be appearing every week, but he's definitely going to come on and do some of that. Helen is going to come on. JR from Geek Chat 1 is going to come on. I'll have to talk to Gemma. I know Robert is reading through the books, but we're going to have all sorts of special guests in the book club. And it's going to be a weekly thing. We're going to go through one story each week, or 2 stories maybe, which will be appropriate. They'll probably be around 2 hours long. And yeah, we're going to do a Witcher book club. And I felt that would be kind of a cool way as we go towards season 2. We'll do the first book. That'll probably take, a couple of months to get through because there's all sorts of different stories. As well as Sword of Destiny has some short stories, mainly short stories as well.
Yeah,
so we're going to do the book club. Witcher book club starting next week, next Friday. So I'm really excited about that. Thomas Pappas, who is helping write for the channel and doing research, he's going to appear. So yeah, it's going to be really cool. And chat, hype for the book club. I'm super excited about that. But let's take some questions, Aziz.
Cool. What y'all got for us?
Yeah, what y'all got for us? I'm going to drink some more coffee here. Sorry, me and Aziz have been. It's been an hour and 36 minutes. There's so much to talk about, really. Like we could do like a whole nother episode on season 1. Like that's how much there really is to. Blue Dragon says, "Did you see the positive review in the Atlantic, which says The Witcher is better than Game of Thrones?" I have not. I try not to look at too many of the critic reviews. I'm actually going to be doing a video speaking a little bit about. Why you shouldn't go, like, I'm not saying that you can't trust these critic reviews. I'm saying why you should just enjoy it for yourself. Like, I feel like something like The Witcher, me and Aziz have talked about, that has fairy tales and all sorts of different stuff that you connect with. The CGI is going to be compared to Game of Thrones no matter what. That's kind of the high standard that we've had for television. But I'm going to do a video on why those things don't matter as much anymore and why you should just enjoy it for you and try to make your own decisions without looking at too many of these reviews out there. I'm actually going to make a video on that. Aziz, did you see any? I know we spoke about articles that we saw, and we thought that like there are some really kind of irresponsible articles that have been put out there. We can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Like you said, there's a couple of them that really just didn't give it a chance. And I think one of the most irresponsible things is just because the popularity of Game of Thrones and because, people who are reviewing, a lot of them are doing it for a living, the temptation to compare it to Game of Thrones is really strong. Now, we've compared it to Game of Thrones a lot, but we've compared it on a plot by plot basis, like comparing characters, plots, themes, arcs. What I really don't like is is it better than Game? Like, who cares if it's better? That's going to be up to the individual to decide. There is no like central governing body that decides that something's better than another. That's entirely up to the individual. So I find that to just be a waste of time comparing the two in terms of which is better. Comparing them in terms of like actual content. I'm all for that. They go for it. That's like
comparative analysis. That's great.
Yeah, that's fun. But I don't care. I'm not just completely uninterested in which one was better discussions. Like because they're not going to convince me. I'm going to decide which one's better for me. You're going to decide which one's better for you, and everyone else is going to do the same. So Yeah, I think the critics have been kind of annoying with this. I agree with you.
I think we should explain why this is happening, though. This is the first big fantasy epic show after Game of Thrones. Like, Game of Thrones just ended like 6-7 months ago, and I think that this is to be expected. But I think that, hopefully when House of the Dragon comes out, hopefully that's sooner than later. I'm super excited for that. I know you are, Aziz, as well. We'll take whatever we can get with more Song of Ice and Fire for sure. Hopefully it'll be done well. But I think that this was bound to happen. And we know that there's other shows out there like Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings that are going to be coming out and stuff like that. And now that there's another example of a show that can attain a sense like Game of Thrones, because The Witcher is the most searched, most viewed, pirated, whatever thing right now. There's going to be more shows that are going to be coming out like this.
Yeah, I mean, if we look ahead to 2021, for example, we're probably going to have Witcher Season 2, House of the Dragon, the Lord of the Rings show might be out by then, and the Wheel of Time show might be out by then. It's going to be a really, really good time to be a fan of fantasy on TV. So it's good that some of these are getting established because it's going to be a little harder to break in. Like the bar is going to be We're going to see a lot of different things, and I some of them will be good.
This always happened with Star Wars too, like the next big sci-fi movie, that was out there. Now we have The Mandalorian, and Disney Plus is going to be doing Marvel shows. I'm excited for that. That's kind of a nice little difference there. But there's always going to be this, especially with critics, right? This is going to happen, and I think in a way, me and Aziz are both critics, because we evaluate what we like about a show and what we dislike. But I think it and I saw this. Aziz is actually the one that told me. I think he said this in a tweet, or he told me this. He's like, "You can't be objective when you're angry." And I remember you saying that to me when we were drinking or just hanging out or something. And that's one thing that kind of stuck out with me. And it's so true. It's so true. And I think that a lot of people are still hurt by what happened with Game of Thrones season 8. And that's why they want to do this comparison. And listen, there's some parts of the CGI where I was like, that's kind of like,
yeah.
But you know what though? I friggin' used to love Xena and Hercules and those Sinbad, all those cheesy shows. I used to love that. And I kind of like that there is this cheesy element in The Witcher.
Yeah, people are comparing. I've seen a lot of people compare it to those Xena and Hercules. Like it kind of scratches that itch, and I do think it's got a lot more depth to it than those shows. But I do agree that it has some of that feel to it, where it's kind of this campy adventure, which is not. It doesn't fully take itself seriously. But I would say that it has much deeper storytelling, and it does take itself seriously sometimes. And it's kind of like we said before. It balances taking itself seriously with being serious. And it does that very well. But it definitely has that feel of those kind of those 90s adventure kind of pulpy. I've compared with The Witcher to Conan. Now, Conan is the actual original, first ever sword and sorcery story. Before Lord of the Rings, before any of that. Now, what J.R.R. Tolkien did was he made the first literary fantasy epic. Conan was pulp, which isn't to say it's not good quality. Pulp just means that it's not literature in that there's no character development. There's not necessarily long-term story arcs. Conan is a series of adventures, and this character of Conan has a lot in common with Geralt in that he's basically unbeatable in combat, but is kind of flawed in a lot of other ways, like his personality aspects. Like he doesn't have peers for a lot of things like that. He's kind of an outsider. And it's got Conan has a real sense of humor. It's very funny in a lot of ways. And it's got this vast sprawling world building that incorporates a lot of real world, slightly changed real world stuff. So fans of Conan, I think, would really enjoy The Witcher because it's got that same feel, which is similar to Xena and Hercules. But I think even those have their own sort of rooting in the originals. Like I said, Robert E. Howard is the author of Conan, and that's truly where it started, I think you could say.
Yeah, I have seen people been making that comparison, and they're not wrong. The way, because we do have that monster of the week type of episode mixed in with the more centralized overarching plot that we talked about that is going to be more of a thing in season 2. And the showrunner's been on record saying that as well, a couple of different times, hey, we were not pigeonholed, but this is kind of what we had to do to make the future seasons more understandable. We had to. This is otherwise we wouldn't have had Ciri in season 1. Essentially.
Yeah, which is weird to not have. That would be like not having Jon until season 2 or Dany until season 2. That'd just be weird. Yeah, you got to at least introduce the character. So it's just too strange to not have that. Yeah, I mean they could have done that. It wouldn't have been the strange, but I think it would be a little too much.
There's some comments here. Stacy Meyer says, I love that they didn't just throw a ton of CGI. They invested more in the characters and the plot, as they should.
Yeah.
There was some complaints. The Stregobor scene, you know, unabashed nudity to kind of start the show off. There's this like Garden of Eden type of like, hey, there's just like 8 naked women hanging around there. And there was a lot of nudity.
Yeah. It's true. There was. It's kind of like, it seems to be a pattern with a lot of shows. It's like they just have to throw in a lot of nudity in the first few episodes, and then they dial it down. Even Game of Thrones did that. It looks like The Witcher, because if you look at the first 4 episodes of The Witcher, the second 4, the majority of the nudity is at the first 4. And it's like, well, it's that same pattern again. Like Netflix, HBO, they all seem to do it. Like really, Game of Thrones did not have very much nudity in seasons 6, 7, 8, even like 3, 4, and 5. It was a ton in season 1, a good bit in season 2, and then it was kind of just sparsely. It was still there, but not like. You know, I don't know. It's some sort of strange pattern with TV shows that I think we maybe need to move past that. But for whatever reason, it's still there. But there is a lot of people have pointed out they appreciate that there's no sexual violence in The Witcher, whereas there's a lot of it in Game of Thrones. Which, not to say there won't necessarily be, but I think it'll be handled better because there's a female showrunner. Yeah. She's going to know how to handle it a lot better. It won't be as brittle. It won't be as
well. I mean,
it'll be handled properly. Well, I hope so.
Queen Calanthe did mention like what the Nilfgaardian army does, and there is this like and some of the game, especially in the games too, and in the books, there is this talk of how war, you know, soldiers, you know, rape and kill and do this kind of thing. So there is that discussion. That discussion does happen, but I think like with Lauren at the helm, they're going to be intelligent about how to do that.
They'll have it. They just won't like throw it in our face and make it make it a big plot point. Like we know it happens. We don't need it. Like we don't need Carl Tanner going to go after Amira just because that's what he would do. Like, yeah, we know that's what he would do. We don't need to have a whole bunch of screen time for it though. You can imply it later. Like you can have that be a subtlety and not just like, look, rape, haha. Like, come on, guys. Like, be a little more subtle with it.
By the way, if that really is Anya Chalotra, which I'm not sure it is, she would. There's a lot of people that like mentioning the orgy, the simulated orgy and that's really interesting part of the books too, because Geralt's like bringing the apple juice, and he's like, "What the hell is going on here?"
Yeah, he's like, I brought you apple juice.
I also love the videos of the hms and the fucks put together. That was really
That's really good. Yeah.
It's so cool that they brought on so many different people that were so invested. And Henry's played through The Witcher twice, the video games.
Did you see that there were 207 auditions for Geralt? 207. But
Henry's so perfect for him. Did you hear the story about him breaking his armor because his muscles were so big?
What the hell? What a problem to have.
He's so jacked that they had to make multiple costumes. Like his muscles are so huge. He dehydrated himself to make his muscles look more veiny.
Yeah, more defined. Yeah, that's like a thing bodybuilders do, right?
He's always been jacked since he's done Superman. But
yeah, right. That'll give you a little bit of perspective on musculature being Superman. Yeah, jeez.
There's been a lot of funny memes out there of like toss a coin at Henry's ass and stuff like that.
You just bounce right off. Yeah, the coin it'll break. The cord will split. It'll break.
He's a good-looking guy. Like, let's just be honest about it. He's a handsome fella. Can't deny it.
You know, he's the 4th of 5 boys, and he's got 4 brothers.
My God.
Yeah, you should Google it. Look up because there's several photos of them all standing next to each other.
Are they all super handsome or?
Well, maybe not quite as handsome as him, but it's a handsome batch, I'd say.
And you know what too? He's got the goddamn British accent to go with it. Like I always have to hear about it. Robert in Deep Geek and his lovely voice.
Yeah, I loved the trailers where they had Henry Cavill reading like the first few bits of The Lesser Evil, like cats and children noticed him first. And it's like, oh yeah, that's good, man. That's good.
So let's kind of go with like pick a couple of favorite moments and then what you're most excited for season 2, and then we'll end the live stream.
Okay.
What were your overall favorite moments? Like, I know you really like the Rare Species episode. That's one of your favorite short stories.
Yeah. I really like Geralt's flashbacks in the wagon. I really like the battle at Sodden. I'm not hugely too big on the action, but the battle at Sodden was really good, and so was Geralt's fight with Renfri's crew, and then with Renfri. That was really,
he
really
did that
good
all
quality.
in one shot, one take, by the way. Apparently.
Oh my goodness, really? Yeah, apparently they reshot it. Like it was done, and then they redid it. But that's something people may not be aware of is a lot of the fight choreography is Vladimir Furtick, who is
the Night King,
Game of Thrones, and the Night King, and all that. So that's pretty cool. I really liked the scenes, the cinematography for Cintra and the burning of Cintra. That was really well done.
Cinematography was fantastic. The color schemes, I felt like some of there's some parts where it was way too dark, but I felt like the long wide angle camera shots, especially in the Betrayer Moon episode, like the horror-y alien type of shots they got with that. There was a lot of really, really good camera work that I went back and watched it for a third time. People, the whole season really, really impressed me. If you go back and watch it again and you just go through some of the scenes, you're like, damn, like you can appreciate it more, I think.
I thought it was a really good choice to make it more gothic looking than medieval. Like it was a little more modern looking, and not modern, but more modern than medieval, which gives it a different feel. That helps push back some of the inevitable comparisons to Game of Thrones and things like that, which have that medieval, like the castles in Game of Thrones are very medieval looking. Not all of them, but mostly. The Witcher went for more of a Gothic / Eastern European medieval. So it's definitely like people who don't know the difference are going to look at it and see and call it the same. But if you're more familiar with it, it's the differences really stand out. And Game of Thrones, actually, to be fair, Game of Thrones taught me to pay more attention to that kind of stuff because they put so much detail in the costumes and armor and things like that. So I'm now, anytime I see a big production, I'm really focused on that stuff as much as I can. And the detail level on The Witcher is excellent.
Yeah, we were definitely spoiled with that. We had so many great directors, and they worked so hard on the sets. I learned, talking a lot with Andy McClay and Bobby Marno and those guys from The Wolf and the Crows who were extras on Game of Thrones. They had such a high level of respect for the people that, the people that we often don't get to praise. We're often, praising the directors and all that. That just like the sets and all that kind of stuff that is constructed was just so magnificent. And I think that we're getting a lot of that with The Witcher too. This is kind of we can appreciate the costumes too. Were just wow.
They're really good. Here's a good question from Erin M. She says, "Were you disappointed at all in the truncation of the Brooklyn Forest plot?" Yeah. A little bit. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to say, like, hey, y'all, if you're planning on reading the books, there's a lot more to do with that, and it's interesting. Like the Dryad stuff, there's more to it. There's a little more depth to it, but I can kind of understand why some of that stuff is very internal. It's very like in the head of the characters. And it's really hard to bring that out. So
it would have added a bigger emotional impact, I think, of a specific character. But I understand why they did it, because the final scene of the season did feel appropriate, even though they didn't do the Brooklyn Forest stuff without spoiling too much, I think.
And I don't think it was super clear that the waters of Brooklyn, like, she was immune to it. Like Dara worked on Dara, and which was kind of like to show that what it's supposed to do. And he had a great reason for drinking it. That was cool, because that's not really in the book. This Dara character going, I want to forget. My life has been traumatic. Like, I would love to forget all that nonsense that happened to me, all that bad stuff. But she's like, yeah, I've had trauma too. Okay, maybe forgetting this is a good idea, but it didn't work. And because she's magical in herself, it was like,
then she has like a brand green dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and so there was definitely so there's some things they had to leave out. That's a little. I also was a little slightly disappointed with the beginning of where Geralt's just like looking for the gin, whereas in the book they're just trying to fish. They're hungry. That's a really common thing that Geralt and Dandelion / Jaskier are just like they're broke again because they're constantly like Geralt's making money, but he's got lots of upkeep. He's got to get his armor fixed, buy new potions, and feed his horse. All he's got to keep rotating.
Specifically, those two stories, I felt like that and the Edge of the World plot line, they definitely cut a lot out of. There's someone that is talking about Nivellen in the chat as well. That still has a possibility like that Lauren did say they wanted to include that in season 1. That could be something that they included in season 2. I'm not sure if they do that though with how I definitely think they're going to do Shard of Ice, which we don't want to spoil. We agree on that. But yeah, well, there only can be so many.
yeah, it's true. You got to cut something. But there's other little bits that, for example, someone here mentions. I lost the question. You should say something while I'm looking for this because I might take me a second.
Danelle Peoples tossing a coin to your YouTubers. Says, tossing a coin, great stream. Thank you so much. By the way, shameless plug, everyone. We got something really cool on the channel that was just added. It's called the join button. And basically, I'm doing extra content every week, extra Witcher videos. And if you join, it's $4.99 a month. It's kind of like Patreon. And basically, you get to participate in like join only polls and stuff like that. Maura Lee was the first one that just signed up. It's a really exciting thing. And I'm super proud that I've been able to accomplish that with the channel. Because when I started out 3 years ago, I never thought that I would ever reach 40,000 subscribers. So
word.
Join button.
Yeah, you should do join, y'all. It's a great way to support Kyle here.
Anyways, okay. Did you find what you found? Yeah.
I couldn't actually, but there's some other good questions. Here's one. What do people think of the music? Well, obviously we love Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, not just as the fact that it's a catchy, fun song, but the fact that actually fits the plot because it's supposed to be a song to help Geralt's reputation improve, and the fact that it's a catchy song that would catch on. I love that it is actually catchy. But as far as like it's fair to say that unlike a lot of other big production shows, the intro isn't really anything special like Westworld, Game of Thrones. Well, those are both the same guy, Ramin Djawadi doing the music. So Ramin, yeah. So it's fair to say The Witcher doesn't stand out in that sense, but some of the music in the show is pretty good. But I'd say it's not, not one of the bigger standout parts of the show. It's solid, but not amazing.
There were some similarities with some of the Witcher 3 tunes.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And the Witcher 1 contract. Marcin, I hope I'm not mispronouncing this, Przybyłowicz.
That's hard to say.
Yeah, Przybyłowicz. I don't know, but I don't know if they used him specifically, but I do remember some of the tunes that I've heard. I'm like, oh, okay, there's some, like, especially the Witcher theme, Geralt's theme, and some of the other stuff. I did recognize some of the tunes from the Witcher 1 soundtrack and some from the Witcher 3. I think they use some of the same arrangements, at least. I recognize that. So I'm not specifically 100% sure on that if it's Marcin or not, but it could be that, they have another composer and they have some sort of agreement. But the music is good.
Yeah, it's very solid. It's just difficult because there's so many good TV show theme songs out these days. Like the Mandalorian music is so good. For example,
he did all the Black Panther stuff, did he not?
He did, yeah. And he's doing I forgot already. He's already signed on to do another show or movie that I slipped my mind. I just heard his name he's been picked up from something else, and I've already forgotten it.
It had that like it had the great like samurai Western vibes in there. The classic. It was kind of hip hoppy too. Like there was like a really great mix in the Mandalorian, but The Witcher has your classic, your medieval bar tunes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So another question is about the casting for Triss. I guess some people have complained about it. I don't really understand the complaints.
That's a bad rumor. It's not happening.
Oh, about the changing. Oh, yeah. No, not about that. I just meant that some people aren't. There was some people that don't love the casting. I don't understand that. I think she's a very solid casting.
You know why? You know why they're doing this?
Why?
Because
of the game?
Like, Triss has humongous tits in the game, and she's got like the red pony handle. Like, it's such bullshit. I gotta call. I
the
gotta
book
call.
version of the character is never shows cleavage because she's got a scar.
I gotta be honest with this. It's a bunch of incels that are upset that she didn't like. The books and the games, like,
she doesn't have red hair in the books either. She has chestnut hair in the books.
And I think that we gotta like listen. Like, she's not a main character in the books, and I think that that's why people are getting upset about it. And the showrunner has spoke about this a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that she's not recast. I don't think they're going to do that just based on some people being upset that her tits aren't bigger. Sorry. And I'm not trying to be inflammatory towards you, Anna, in the chat. I'm just saying I think that's the biggest reason why people have an issue with that. Is because in the games you can romance Triss with Geralt, and it's just, I think it's really, really silly to just demean the actress like that. I think she did the fine job.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that. That makes sense. Like, I now that you mention it, I believe I've seen a screen cap of Triss on screen. I didn't realize that was her. I'm like, who is that? Because that's nothing like the book description is. She doesn't look like that even a little bit. So yeah, Catherine Beth's chestnut is dark red, which is true, dark red. And her hair, I thought the actress's hair was like slightly reddish. It's definitely brown, but I thought it was a red brown. Anyway, whatever. Like
in the second game, I guess I could talk about it more because it's not like such a spoiler in the books. Like, anyways, there's this thing that happens with Geralt, and he gets separated from Yennefer, and then Triss and him have a relationship, and there's this huge and that's because she's has a huge impact on Geralt in the Kingdom of Temeria. And she's, this court mage like Yennefer. Yeah. So there's this huge storyline with her. And I think people are like, oh, that's like really great. And don't get me wrong, it's a great story. I love it because I played the games. But there's a distinct difference between the books and the game stuff for Triss.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I
think it's fair because the games were so important, unusually important to the fandom. It's not usually such a big thing, a game. So I'm not denigrating that even a little bit. Because it is, a lot of people know the game storyline. I do not. I don't even know it a little bit. So it's fair to want that. But of course, I would prefer it stick to book canon as much as possible. Even if I knew the games, I would probably prefer the book canon. But maybe if I knew the games, I would want some of that in there. I would probably appreciate it more. So yeah, I mean, I can understand that there's different people want different things from it because there's two major canons here. But to me, the books come first.
Like, I want to make this argument. Like Toussaint, for example, like there's a whole DLC on Toussaint. In the last book, Toussaint is something that we see. I think that there is a possibility, like in the books, like, I mean, in the third game of The Witcher, the Wild Hunter, like, it's huge, right? Yeah. And the Wild Hunt are also in the last book. So I think that they could, I'm not saying that they're going to take plot line from the actual games, but that, just like for example, the actor and actress for the actor for Bronn, Jerome Flynn, he had a bigger role than Bronn had in the books. There's always, like, for TV adaptations, I think that we have to keep more of an open mind that things could change one way or the other. It could be less, it could be more. And I think that they're going to keep an open mind on that. They will listen to criticisms that, on especially from hardcore fans. Like, Lauren is in Reddits. Like, the showrunner is literally in Reddits talking with people like, hey, like, this is the critical decision, the creative decision that we made for this specific reason. But I think that we have to keep an open mind. This is only the first season. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that, and the story, and like, we're only really getting into the main novel, the first main novel, The Blood of Elves. So I think that there is still some confusion around all of these different kind of parts of The Witcher, because there is a lot. And I think that that's part of the reason why some people, and I'm not saying people are wrong for having that reaction, because some people like the games more than the books. Some people don't like the books at all. Some people dislike the games, and that's totally cool.
Yeah, totally cool.
But that's explaining why. Yeah. Anna, I mean, some people are saying Anna Schaefer is whatever. That's cool. I mean, like I said, you can.
Yeah, not everyone. To be fair, not everyone wants the video game version of Triss for that reason. There's just other. Yeah, it's not the only criticism, but you're right that is a criticism that's very prominent that I'm fine with. Not
and I think too, the point that we should make is, like, actresses in movies that like these characters, like there's like, we got to admit that actors and actresses often get a role because they're really good looking, right? I mean, that's just a reality.
Very true.
But there's been a lot of movies that have warped the image of women to specifically think that they have to appear a certain way. They have to be a certain bra size, or have this amount of ass, or have to be this good looking to play a specific role. And I just disagree with that. You know what I mean? So I think that, but like I said, it's not wrong to have that opinion if you enjoy that part of it.
Do we have any other questions?
I think not sure. I mean,
yeah, there's I saw another good question. I've already forgotten that one too. There are some good ones, but I can't keep them in my head.
Yeah, let's do one more, and then one thing we're looking forward to in season 2, and then wrap up. We're over 2 hours.
Oh, we are? Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, here's one question that says, how much of the books is actually in the show? It's tough to put like a number on that, but it's a very good amount. There's definitely stuff cut, but it's a pretty strong at keeping most of the elements. There's small stuff changed. Like one point I was making earlier that we got off point on, like the scene with the gin. One slight disappointment I had for that is that it removed a little bit of literary paralleling, which was that Dandelion and Geralt are fishing, and they find this gin, and they, first of all, they catch this giant catfish, and it's like, whoa, they're trying to catch, and the catfish leads them around, and it's funny, it's kind of comical. But then that's also how the story climaxes, with Yennefer trying desperately to cling to the gin. And it's very similar. It's like the catfish, and them trying to control this catfish and hold on to it so they can just have a meal, is like this little microcosm of a much bigger problem later, when this gin is flopping around on Yennefer's magical line, kind of the same equivalent of smashing parts of the town, breaking the house. And the destructive force of the gin is much, much greater.
Yeah,
so that's really cool. But also I love just the idea that Yennefer is like unabashedly going for power, because that's another just
the way the men treat her in that town.
Yeah, the storytelling is like, that's a thing that a lot of storytellers won't do, is showing a woman that's just like shamelessly pursuing power, and not having that be like, not having to apologize for that. No, that's just what she is. That's Yennefer, like, really wants power. And it's like, that's who she is, y'all. Don't try to put her in a box.
and that's kind of a cool thing that you should mention too, because each character kind of has a specific thing that they're looking for. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And Yennefer, power is security for her, right? She never had that security before. And I think when she gets that, and I think that's why Tissaia takes such an interest in Yennefer, because she knows she doesn't have that, but can give her that, and that's why their relationship is strong. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you make. Power is another theme. Being able to essentially have the power of choice at all. We see that she didn't have that in the beginning of her story. Right?
Yeah, magic is an interesting vehicle for creating a high magic is a different vehicle for creating a different type of power that exists in a world where that can transcend gender barriers. For example, like a lot of the reason men dominate early history so much is just because of pure violence, the capability of violence. But that is not, the setting is different here, because magic changes the game. Not only that, but you have more of a you have a lot of other elements of other races, and elves and gnomes and dwarves and halflings that also have different views on gender. Like the dryads, there are no male dryads, for example. That's just like, whoa, how does a species even function without males?
Yeah,
well, that's part of what makes it interesting.
I spoke about that in my episode 4 review. There's some there's in the universe, there's kind of this debate on whether they were created by the elves or whether they were there in the beginning with the gnomes and kind of the halflings and stuff like that. So it's kind of a cool, there's like a lot more that you can learn.
Yeah. Are they engineered? I mean, that's something that's a vaguely connection to Game of Thrones. Like all the others in Game of Thrones were men, and maybe not in the books, but all the children of the forest, well, definitely not in the books, but in the book, in the show, all the children of the forest were female. So you kind of have a similar thing, but they obviously weren't borrowing from each other. They're borrowing from real world myths. That I think a lot of quote unquote real world dryads are also female only. I think that's kind of a standard part of that legend. I might need to do more research on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Really love how everyone came with us to get together today. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone. Aziz, do you want to talk a little bit about your channel?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. This was really fun.
My hair's all messed up. Sorry, everyone.
My first chance to really talk about The Witcher on a stream, which is fun. I've been talking about it with my friends and all that. It's been really fun. So this is great to kind of like get my feet wet with talking about a series that I don't know as well as A Song of Ice and Fire. So I'm eager to finish the books and then reread them. I'm going to start them over as soon as I finish. I definitely have to have 2 full run-throughs before I really feel like I have a good handle on it. Even then, I'll need to go more.
Fire expert people. Shit.
So my channel is called History of Westeros. We focus on the books, but also talk about the show. Of course, we don't have much to say about the show these days because we're doing a full reread of the series, but we're taking the show in mind because the show revealed some stuff that a lot of which will happen in some form or another on the books as well. So we're having a lot of fun with the reread, looking for foreshadowing we missed. And let me tell you, there is a lot, my friends, and that's super fun. So every Sunday we have a reread episode. We're about to start Storm of Swords. We finished Clash of Kings right at the end of 2019. So we're hopefully going to finish our reread right around the time Winds of Winter drops, but who knows when that's actually going to be. So
that Brienne point that you brought up the other day blew my mind. The first one, Jamie says, "Would you prefer to be called Sir?"
Yeah, and it's like it's like the 10th paragraph of his first chapter. He's already called her Sir Brienne. I'm like, oh man, it's right there, y'all. Yeah, that was great. And all the connections to the Hound. Anyway, I'm gonna start getting into Game of Thrones stuff. I should stop. So yeah, this was great fun. I can't wait to this is just starting. Like this is like season 1. So many of us are just getting started with The Witcher, delving into the lore. I really look forward to all the new discoveries and fan moments and fun things we have to look forward to. It's a great, big, awesome journey ahead of us, and I hope to bring more people in to enjoy it with us.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And like I said, everyone, if you are interested in Game of Thrones, The Song of Ice and Fire content, Valerie read us. I personally don't partake in the live chats, but whenever I get a chance to listen, I do try to support my friends' podcasts and stuff. So you can do that in the description of this video. Like I said, they have a Patreon, they have a Facebook, their own website, and all that kind of stuff. So all the links are in the description of the video if you have any questions. And even if you're watching this after, you want to reach out to Aziz, put a question in there, and I'll send it to Aziz, and we'll try to figure out, if we want to have more of a discussion in the comment section or Facebook or whatever. And Aziz, Aziz is definitely going to come back for a book club at some point.
Yeah,
like I said, we talked about that I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was deciding whether I was going to do it at all. And Aziz is like, "Yeah, I should do it," because that's basically what Aziz does on his channel. It's like one big giant cool book club.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we'll probably do a little Witcher content on my show eventually. Shay wants to read it as well. She's on the Last Wish, but like I said, I want to lock it down more. I want to learn the world more. I want to be more prepared.
It is weird because like you've known A Song of Ice and Fire for such a long time and you know it in and out. When you don't know something as much and you want to approach it and you want to talk about it, and there's hardcore fans that have known about it for such a long time. It's weird because you were like as content creators, this is the first season of The Witcher, so it's kind of really cool. Yeah. All these people are just like beginning together. It's like this kind of new journey. It's really interesting.
When I started with The Song of Ice, when Game of Thrones TV show came out, I had read the books 10 years before, or at least the ones that were out. But with this, I read them 10 days before, so and not even all of them.
He's almost done.
Yeah, so I got a lot to catching up to do. And like you said, there's people who know it so much. Like when I'm talking Game of Thrones, I feel like I can, I can keep up with anybody, but with The Witcher, I got catching up to do. I acknowledge that for sure. So, but it's such a fun thing. I'm really excited to do all that catching up. So it's going to be worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, and thank you to all. Like, there's been a bunch of new subscribers, especially from the Witcher Addicts book on Facebook. So if you haven't checked out that community, I've met so many cool people there. Just having really cool discussions. Aziz is also there. A bunch of people from our community are there. So I would highly recommend to go check that group out. As Stacy, whether Stacy or Shelby want to put that in the chat, you want to put a link in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that. For everybody that watches today, thank you. There were some people watching on Facebook. I saw Eric Kluth and Ashaya watching on Facebook for a little bit. So
cool,
that was really cool. Everyone that participated, whether you were on Facebook or in YouTube with us, everybody that made a donation, that tossed a coin to the YouTubers, that was really cool. Really appreciate that. And this was really fun. This, I'm going to try to do a Witcher live stream every Friday, probably around the same time, whether it's just me with the book club or having another guest, stuff like that. Like I said, I'm going to have multiple guests come on and discuss the Witcher. Maybe we'll get some other community people that have been creating Witcher content for a while on the channel. That would be cool.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, get some veteran community members on the channel or something like that. So thank you for joining us today. It was really, really fun. Shall we end with a little toss a coin?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
wait. We gotta like look. I gotta like pull up the words here. Let's
no. Let's just do like toss a coin. Toss a coin to your
Witcher. Oh, Valley of Plenty.
Oh, Valley of Plenty. Oh. Toss a coin to your YouTuber.
Oh, Valley of Plenty. Put that elf back on the shelf.
Thanks for joining, everyone. And we'll see you on the next video.